Chapter 833 The elves did it from a bird's view. The shipyard was built in a way that would look like a giant T. The left side of the shipyard had a frigate almost finished being built, and the other side had a man-o'-war. The dwarves were building these ships under the king's order. Although Han Torum was one of the great 8 clans, their leader was the king himself. Unlike the Guardian Guild, where the leader was no king but was called Supreme Guardian, who answered to no king. Meanwhile, the straight platform stretching toward the ocean contained materials needed to build the ships. It had a warehouse and a giant forge that fumed heat and ash. Noah could hear the dwarves hitting metal with their hammers. Thanks to his senses, he located 6 dwarves on guard. 2 dwarves stood on the shipyard's edge, looking at the ocean. 2 more dwarves patrolled the forge while another 2 dwarves stood on either side of the roof with their crossbows. Noah swam toward a cargo ship docked at the shipyard and slowly emerged from the water. Luckily, the cargo ship was the size of a small fishing ship and had no dwarves on board. It was empty as far as Noah could see. "I count 6 dwarves, Supreme Guardian," Neela whispered after emerging from the water. "No more calling me by my rank or name," Noah said to Neela and the others. "Position yourself to take out the dwarves at the same time. Wait for my signal." "As you wish," Neela said before merging into the water once again. His team was competent, and he didn't need to micromanage them every single time. They coordinated among themselves and positioned them from where they could take out the dwarves with blow darts. These darts were laced with Noah's own concoction, a powerful knockout serum. Since all these dwarves were at the body-strengthening stage, they only had to use a small dosage. Is it true the Dwarf King is only a core formation warrior? How could they be one of the great 8 clans when their leader is just a core formation warrior? Norvin asked Noah. Don't underestimate the dwarves by their weak cultivation power. They substitute that with connections, wealth, and their superior dwarven engineering. Also, have you heard of Moguls, the mercenary guild? The dwarves in there aren't weak. They use some kind of blood ritual to boost their cultivation. While the team was taking their position, Noah discussed the dwarves with Norvin. When it came to what was happening in R, Norvin pretty much had no idea. He was learning the power dynamics and the other racers in R little by little. So Norvin seemed a little ignorant to some in the guild. Noah noticed Neela and his team raising their thumbs, indicating they were in position. They waited for his signal as Noah leaned to the side, taking another look at the dwarves. Then he snapped his fingers, creating a quick flash of light. This flash was the signal. And the moment the team saw it, they raised their blowguns, blew into it, and sent a dart soaring through the air. Ouch! Blimey! One of the dwarves slapped his neck as he felt a sting. But there was something between his hand and neck. The dwarf pulled it out to see a tiny 10-inch arrow, made of what seemed to be silver. In a blink of an eye, the serum kicked in as the dwarves rolled their eyes upwards before collapsing down. Move! Noah ordered the team as he leaped out of the water and dashed into the shipyard. Although the shipyard where the dwarves build secret weapons, they didn't put too many dwarves to guard. They believed too many guards would draw unwanted attention to the place. Hence, they had few guards, and they never opened their mouths about the underground facility, even when they were drunk. Their secrecy worked in Noah's favor. Inside the shipyard, he saw countless ship parts and giant chains hanging from the ceiling. Everywhere he turned, he saw nothing but metal, ship parts, wood, and empty mugs. Norvin leaped onto a chain above and looked around the shipyard to locate the underground passage. The dwarves might be drunk and hot-headed but not stupid enough to keep the weapon in plain sight. Norvin's eyes glistened like rubies as he used magical perception to see through the shipyard. Everything seemed normal and not out of place until his gaze fell on a golden train running down from a lever hidden behind a stack of wooden crates. There, Norvin pointed his finger at the wood crates as Noah and the team slowly sneaked toward it. Meanwhile, they noticed a couple of dwarves walking toward them. They fell down as fast as they entered the room. Noah turned and saw Neela with the blowgun. Her reaction was too fast to the point none of her teammates realized that she had just fired 2 blow darts. Noah gave a nod of approval before turning his gaze back to Norvin. "Knock out everyone and meet me down," said Noah. Since Norvin's true form was small, and he could move around the shipyard without getting detected, Noah tasked Norvin with knocking out the dwarves. Even if he somehow got caught, the dwarves wouldn't connect this to the Guardians. After all, All they saw was a monkey. Speaking of being a monkey, Norvin took out a brown pill from his space ring and tossed it into his mouth. As soon as the pill melted down, his golden fur turned mud brown. Without the shiny golden fur, he looked like a regular monkey. "Go ahead," Norvin whispered, turned around and leaped toward the shipyard's left side, where they were building a frigate. "Follow me," Noah said to his team as they slowly sneaked toward the crates. When they reached the stack of crates neatly placed on top of each, Noah slightly moved the stacks. The wooden crates were surprisingly heavy, which made Noah wonder what was inside of them. The crates moved, making a creaking sound. Then the lever was exposed. However, it was not the typical lever that, when pulled down, would open a door. Instead, this lever made of thick, black metal had numerous tiny gears, nuts and bolts. On top of that, there were 6 keyholes beside the lever. "Should we search those dwarves? They might have the keys," said Neela. Noah nodded as the team swiftly moved away from Noah to search the dwarves. A few minutes later, Neela and the others returned to Noah. Unfortunately, they came empty-handed. "We found no keys, Supreme Guardian. All they had was their swords and mugs." Neela creased her sword-sharp brows. They thought coming here empty-handed would disappoint Noah. On the contrary, he just smiled. Honestly, he expected the dwarves to have some kind of mechanism to protect the entrance. Otherwise, it would be too easy for anyone to enter their secret lair. Fortunately for him and unfortunately for the dwarves, Noah possessed a primordial flame. Neela's face brightened with the blue flames dancing above Noah's hands. No matter how many times they had witnessed the blue flames, they still had the same dumbfounded look on their faces when Noah conjured the flames for the zillionth time. The flame had a certain effect on the guardians. The heavenly flames had a radiant energy that made them calm, courageous, and fearless. Under their gazes, Noah moved the ball of heavenly flames toward the lever and let the heat creep into the keyholes. The metal slowly turned blue to the color of the flame. Inch by inch, the heavenly flames melted down the lock, and then the lock clicked. Noah pushed open the door, revealing a dimly lit staircase that led to the dwarven secret lair. But the opening came with a catch. They weren't built with humans and long-legged species in mind. Instead, it was meant for the dwarves to use. Hence, the doorway was only 4 feet tall. Noah crouched down and entered the doorway, followed by his team. They were careful not to make any sounds until they could locate the weapon and the dwarves guarding it. After climbing down almost 50 steep steps, everyone, including Noah, felt a chill running down their spines. Hammond wasn't kidding when he said the weapon was massive in size. It was almost the size of a frigate. Compared to it, the prototype was just a baby. The weapon didn't even need to be powered up, but if someone simply blew into one end, the bell-shaped mouth would amplify the volume loud enough to kill several commoners. "Put on your masks," Noah ordered the team. He saw several dwarves and no way of knocking them out without getting caught. One by one, Noah's team put on a porcelain mask resembling the face of a mannequin. When they wore the masks, their ears grew a few inches outwards, making them look pointy and elven-like. Those who look at Noah's team would immediately believe they were elves wearing masks. The dwarves and elves hated each other for all reasons, and Noah didn't think adding one more to the pile wouldn't make much of a difference. Initially, he considered using black skull masks to portray themselves as the Dark Lord's army, but after thinking of the dwarves' nature of hot-headedness, he immediately removed that idea from his head. Because if the dwarves went against the Dark Lord, he would kill them, and he would reduce their entire clan to the ground without a shred of mercy. Noah slowly walked forward, stretching his arms and neck. "Stop what you're doing, you filthy animals." Noah's thunderous voice swept across the yard. He was quite good at the way elves would speak to the dwarves in a situation like this. The dwarves almost jumped from their feet when they heard the sudden voice. They immediately jumped down from the weapon, rushed out from the corners, and climbed down through the chains with their battle axes in hand. Bloody elves. The dwarves were more furious than they were shocked. Just the sight of pointy ears made their blood boil. The dwarves didn't even mind the huge cultivation gap between them. That was why the dwarves were often called hot-blooded and borderline stupid when it came to a battle. "Kill those fucking pointy-eared fucks." One of the dwarves raised his battle axe, crying out loud. Chapter 8:34 Save or destroy the weapon. The dwarves let out a battle cry that echoed through the entire space. They rushed at Noah and his group without regard for their lives. Just the sight of pointy ears in their domain twisted something inside the dwarves. Their killing intent skyrocketed as a dwarf threw his battle axe at Noah. The axe soared through the air, but Noah simply flicked his wrist as the axe froze in the air, turned around, and flew straight back to the dwarf. Only the dwarf couldn't stop the axe. It hit the dwarf straight on the head, knocking him out cold in an instant. Noah's team scattered around the space in a blink of an eye. Each used their own speed spell to enhance their speed to the point the dwarves barely saw them. Wind rustled every time Noah's team ran past them. The previously silent workshop of the dwarves turned into a battle zone. Without being able to see the intruders, the dwarves swung their axes left and right blindly. "Stay still and fight us, motherfuckers. I want them dead." The dwarves screamed as loud as they could. Suddenly, a dwarf froze for a moment before falling down. It happened so quickly. One moment he was fine, and the next, he fell to the ground like a lump of coal. Instead of reaching for their fallen comrades, the dwarves roared at Noah and his team, whom the dwarves couldn't see anymore. "What have you done? You will pay for this." The dwarves boiled in rage as their eyes looked like they were about to pop out of their sockets. Their roars could be heard from anywhere in the space. Soon, the dwarves fell one by one. Noah wasn't wasting any more time on the dwarves. He knocked the wind out of many dwarves just with his fists. Eventually, Noah and his team knocked out every dwarf in the hall and gathered before the weapon. "Any idea how to destroy this without making a fuss?" "Too much fuss, I mean," said Neela. "Before we destroy the weapon, look for a safe." "It must be here somewhere," said Noah. Noah's team nodded before heading out to search for the safe, leaving Noah with the weapon. Noah started to walk around the weapon in the hope of trying to get a better understanding of the weapon. He wondered how Hammond came up with such a bizarre contraption to exchange messages between two places without the use of arch energy. As he reached the weapon's back, he noticed a door. Noah twisted the golden knob, opening the door. When the door opened, his face was illuminated by the jars lined up inside. His neck hair stood up due to the electric energy coming from the jars. There were almost 50 jars, and each had balls of lightning inside. Lightning in a bottle. Who would have thought that? Noah smiled. Noah tried to pull out a jar, but they were held in place by a magnetic field. So this is what powers up the weapon. How in the hell did these dwarves manage to catch lightning in bottles? Say whatever about the dwarves, they never ceased to amaze Noah with their innovations. Granted, Hammond was on another level compared to the dwarves, but it didn't mean the dwarves were incompetent. It was just their hatred toward the elves that got the better of them and forced them to kidnap Hammond. Still, Noah felt like he was missing something in this whole story. He couldn't put his finger into what it was, but his gut told me he was missing something, a crucial piece of the puzzle. While his team was turning the place upside down, searching for a safe, Noah pulled out a jar from the power compartment and put it in his space ring. He had a feeling this might come in handy later. After closing the compartment, Noah continued to walk around the weapon. When he walked a full circle around it, Neela returned to him with a proud grin on her face. "We found it," said Neela. "Lead the way." Noah sighed in relief inside. He was glad everything had gone according to plan till now. The red-haired beauty led Noah to the safe that was located in a small room. When Noah entered the brightly lit room, he was welcomed by a long oak table, chairs tall enough to accommodate dwarves, and numerous racks filled with parchment and scrolls. Whoever occupied the room didn't give a damn about tidiness. Everything was lying around out of order. It would be a miracle if anyone could find something in the room. The parchment and papers on the ground rustled as they entered the room. "There it is." Neela pointed at the safe built inside the wall to Noah. Just like the lever they used to get into this area, the safe had several keyholes as well as tiny gears. If Noah wanted to get the blueprints unharmed, he would have bothered to look for the keys. Since he was here to obliterate the plans, he just went to the safe and sent a stream of heavenly flames into the keyholes. The entire safe melted down like butter in a few moments. Then, Noah turned his focus onto the bigger problem, the weapon itself. "How do you plan to destroy it?" asked Neela. With these, they heard Norvin's voice. When they turned to the doorway, they saw Norvin, walking toward them in his human form. He carried a red oak barrel on his shoulder. Explosives. I found this in a room. Apparently, it's a new kind of explosive, more powerful and more stable. At least that's what I heard from the dwarves before I knocked them out cold, said Norvin. Push this baby into the weapon and watch it go kaboom. Problem solved. Norvin placed the barrel heavily on the ground as Noah's team almost leaped out of the room. I told you. It's stable. Stop messing around, said Noah with an amused smile. I will take care of destroying the weapon. You guys go ahead and get the dwarves to safety. I don't want them to get caught in the blast, said Noah. If it was Michael, he wouldn't have bothered with saving the dwarves. They built weapons to kill people, so they deserved to die. That would have been Michael's argument. Luckily for the dwarves, Noah wasn't a vengeful god like Michael. He was merciful. I will signal you when we get them to safety, said Norvin before leaving the room with Noah's team. After they left, Noah carried the barrel to the weapon. With a simple leap, Noah reached the weapon's mouth and slowly rolled the barrel down after he attached a rope around the barrel. Noah hovered around the weapon waiting for Norvin's signal. Almost 5 minutes later, Noah heard a roar in the distance. Noah could recognize that roar in his sleep. That was Norvin in his true golden baboon form. Only a few people had seen his true form, which stood 8 feet tall and quite terrifying to look at. That's my cue, Noah mumbled as he raised a hand toward the roof. Then, a beam of light shot through the roof, creating a hole wide enough for Noah to escape through. He slowly hovered toward the hole with the rope attached to the explosive barrel in his hand. When he was just a few meters away from the hole in the roof, Noah snapped his fingers as sparks flew into the rope. Blue fire immediately engulfed the rope and traveled through the rope like a blue dragon. Eventually, the flame traveled into the weapon, away from Noah's sight. For a few moments, nothing happened. Noah just waited for something to happen in utter silence. The silence only lasted for a few moments, though. Boom. Noah heard the sound of a muffled explosion. In a blink of an eye, fire streamed out of the weapon's mouth, and the weapon exploded into bits and pieces. The sheer force of the explosion alone sent Noah flying directly through the hole. Norvin wasn't kidding when he said the explosive was more powerful. A single barrel was enough to destroy a colossal weapon to pieces and shake the entire building. Noah felt truly lucky that he put the barrel into the weapon instead of making it explode outside it. If that were the case, the explosion would have been several times more powerful and destroyed the entire building along with the adjacent buildings. Dark smoke rose to the sky itself, forming a giant cloud above the building. Noah used the cloud of smoke to his advantage and flew away from the place. While he was flying away, he saw more and more dwarves running toward the fire instead of away from it. He felt pity for the dwarves. But luckily, Noah cleared the building before setting up the explosion. His task here was done without a hiccup. Good thing Andreas used all his soul energy, brewing special potions for Noah. Otherwise, they would have had a huge argument about whether to destroy the weapon or not. By the time the higher-ups from Hontorum appeared at the shipyard, Noah and his team were long gone. All the dwarves they knocked out pointed at one group, the elves. As a result, the Empress would have a long discussion with her ministers and schedule another secret meeting with none other than the Dark Lord himself. Chapter 835 The Inside Man of the Dark Lord. A few days after Noah destroyed the weapon and the prototype, as evening cast her dusky gown, when the air became fresh and restful, the time of joyful reflection arrived. The brightly lit city of Ice Fair met the peach sky. The evening arrived in stately fashion, with all the grace of a breeze in repose. Neela was on her way to meet her friend and fellow teammate, Alvaro Torres. He lived alone in Ice Fair and worked hard to get to Noah's team. The cobblestone pavement was littered with people of all manners. It wouldn't be an understatement to say the Ice Fair was the hub of Kingdom Kethern. People came from everywhere to Ice Fair to enjoy their time and buy rare things. One could argue that Ice Fair was the second safest place after Penn Town, where the Supreme Guardian resided. Neela wore white robes and put on her hood to cover her face. Some unruly hooligans were fighting and rolling on the ground. Neela walked around a cart that barely avoided the two hooligans. She was on her way to Alvaro Torres to talk about collecting information on potential targets who might be helping the Dark Lord. Everyone in Noah's team was ordered to pursue information about the Dark Lord's subordinates in their free time. However, they were strictly ordered against going after them without Noah's permission. Considering Neela was an ambitious girl, she chose the Dark Lord's head of information gathering as her target. Noah and Alicia believed the Dark Lord had someone powerful, connected, and influential working under him who was responsible for recruiting people into their course as well as gathering information. Neela had a few strong suspects, including Sadie Kaplan, the Silvermoon prodigy. Unfortunately, everyone on Neela's list had higher positions in prominent clans or organizations. Interrogating them without any evidence was equal to killing her own career. That was where Alvaro Torres came into the picture. Alvaro Torres' aunt was an elder in Silvermoon, and Neela hoped to use his aunt to get a meeting with Sadie Kaplan, the most suspicious one on her list. Among the suspects, Sadie Kaplan had the closest relationship with Ghost, and was the most likely candidate who would have been brainwashed by him. After navigating her way through the crowd, she finally arrived at the edge of the city where the nobles tended to live. Bright crystal orbs lit the square with its radiant blue light as Neela turned left and strolled straight into the path that had the sign Torres Manor. Since it was evening and most of the patrons were either drinking in taverns or immersing themselves in pleasuring activities, the path to Torres Manor was void of people. Peach trees accompanied Neela on either side of the path as she enjoyed the calm and peaceful stroll. Soon, she noticed an elegant manor at the end of the road. From the outside, the Torres Manor looked cozy. It was built with walnut wood and has granite decorations. Small, octagon windows added to the overall look of the house, and have been added to the house in a fairly asymmetrical pattern. The manor was shaped like an L. The extension extended into overhanging wooden panels reaching the end of that side of the house. The second floor was bigger than the first, which created a stylish overhang on two sides of the house. This floor had a slightly different style than the floor below. The manor itself surrounded a gorgeous garden with many hidden lights that made the garden come to life at night. As she reached closer to the manor, she noticed two large chimneys sitting at the side of the manor. They fumed gray smoke, which indicated to Neela that Alvaro was home. Neela knocked on the door. "Alvaro." Neela gently tapped the wooden door. She heard a rustling noise coming from within as though Alvaro was rummaging through some parchments. Did I hear a girl's voice? Neela questioned herself. She could swear she heard a girl's voice coming from inside, but it couldn't be since Alvaro was single. "Alvaro." Neela knocked again. This time she added a bit of force. For a few moments, Neela heard nothing. She slowly reached for the dagger dangling underneath her cloak. Even a few moments of silence were enough for fear to creep down their spines. As Supreme Guardians elites, they didn't have the luxury of taking things simply. The Dark Lord was known to strike when least expecting. So Neela's heart and mind feared the worst. Luckily, Alvaro put her mind and heart to rest as he opened the door with his usual grin. Alvaro was a brown-haired youngster with a stubble beard. He was neither too tall nor too short, with a medium-built body. While he was not in the silver armor, he used to wear rather ordinary clothes, like black trousers and a loose-fit cotton shirt that revealed his chiseled chest and muscles. "What were you doing in there?" Neela didn't wait for Alvaro to invite her in. Instead, she pushed him aside and let herself in. Once she entered the room, she was greeted with a cozy fireplace, a comfy sofa set, and a puffy carpet that blanketed the wooden floor. "Please do come in." Alvaro rolled his eyes as he shut the door behind them. Neela plunged herself into the sofa and removed the cloak. "I swear I heard a girl's voice in there. Are you hiding one, Alvaro?" Neela teased Alvaro. "Look under the sofa," said Alvaro with a hint of sarcasm in his voice. Neela leaned forward and pretended to look under the sofa. "I bought a crate of ale from Embercrest." "You want a mug?" asked Alvaro as he went to the kitchen on the corner. "Where in the hell did you get the time to buy ale from the dwarves?" Neela turned around to see Alavro taking out a jade bottle from a wooden crate and pouring its content into two large mugs. The sweet aroma from the ale made her mouth water. Alvaro brought the two mugs to the sofa and sat beside her after handing over one mug to Neela. "Cheers. We deserve it." Alvaro clanked his mug against Neela's. "Yes, we do indeed. We made quite a mess in Dalgarum. Good thing the dwarves have no idea it was us." They are gonna hate the elves even more now, even though I don't know how they can hate them more, said Neela, taking a long sip from the mug, enjoying every bit of the dwarven brewed ale. Her taste buds danced in her tongue and thanked her wholeheartedly. I gotta give credit to the dwarves. They do know how to brew good ale. I just wish Grayson was here with us. Neela signed. Grayson was one of the 2 guardians who lost their lives when the orc's self exploded. If it weren't for the silver armor, more guardians would have lost their lives that day. They felt truly lucky for the armor and the runes engraved in it. To Grayson and Kian, Alvaro raised his mug, toasting for their dead comrades. And about that favor? Neela's voice trailed off. It's on. You have been invited to the Silvermoon beverage party thanks to Aunt Tegan. You owe me one, and if you mess this up somehow, you don't know me. Alvaro chuckled. I want to hug you. Please don't. Alvaro raised both his hands to defend himself from Neela's hug. Please remember, everyone is innocent until proven guilty. You don't know if Sadie is in bed with him or not. I will when I look her in the eyes, said Neela. After some chit-chatting and discussion about their lives, Neela left the manor and headed for her home to get some good night's sleep. It was Noah's new policy to get enough rest and sleep instead of overexerting themselves cultivating. She is gone, Alvaro said, though his house looked empty. The smile on Alvaro's face disappeared, and instead, a darkened expression occupied his face. A breeze of wind blew past Alvaro as it almost snuffed out the fire and light in the room. Then, a shadow figure dressed in all black emerged from the darkest corner in the house. Is she going to be a problem? The dark figure asked Alvaro in a thick, otherworldly voice. Alvaro had a difficult time hiding the fear creeping down his spine. He swallowed mouthful of saliva and managed to turn his gaze toward the dark figure. No. She is just chasing some leads. Good. Because if she is a problem, at best, you will hear from Noah Winston. The dark figure paused for a moment, letting the silence sink into Alvaro's mind. At worst, you will receive a visit from the Dark Queen, said the dark figure. Because of the dark hood covering his head, Alvaro couldn't make out the figure's features. Serving the Dark Lord could be a fruitful endeavor. He will only ask you for your loyalty. In return, you can get anything in this world, said the dark figure as Alvaro rolled his eyes. Spare me the sales pitch. What you're doing here is blackmailing. The only reason you are here and I am not at Noah's home is I don't have a choice, Alvaro growled. To Alvaro's surprise, the dark figure chuckled. Of course you have a choice. You can tell the Supreme Guardian that you feasted on a helpless woman when you weren't supposed to. You can tell him that your lust overshadowed your judgment. I heard your Supreme Guardian is a merciful person. What's the punishment for rape? Castration and lifetime prison? You can ask for forgiveness. You always have a choice. The dark figure amused as Alvaro burned with rage inside. We will be in touch, the dark figure said, giving no damn about Alvaro's fury. The figure turned around to leave when he looked over his shoulder at Alvaro. We have eyes everywhere, Alvaro. Engrave that in your mind. I think we both agree you do not want to meet the Dark Queen. You will hear from me soon. As he said, the dark figure disappeared from the room. Alvaro felt sweat beads trickling down his face after the dark figure left. A sin he committed in the shadows came back to haunt him. He thought he escaped the sin, but now, he was forced to be the Dark Lord's inside man in the Guardian Guild. Chapter 836 Beast of Itanes. Current day. Michael was on his way to harvest everything he needed to fix the gold coins problem. Taskin and Thilv accompanied Michael as Vidora chose to stay with the tribe because they liked how the wood elves treated them. Almost all the trees had sparkling blue leaves instead of the usual green leaves. Not only the cyan color of the forest, but something fresh in the air that put everyone at ease. Michael felt the forest around him was alive. Any predators around here? Michael asked Taskin and Thilv. Except for the wolves Michael killed at Tar's campsite, Michael met no predatory animals. The rabbits, foxes, and birds Michael saw had sparkling bodies. They glistened under the canopy's shade. They used to be around. Taskin started to answer Michael. But ever since the demons occupied the mother tree, they ran deeper into the forest. This place crawled with all kinds of creatures before they invaded us. You cannot walk a minute in the forest without catching a glimpse of something. Now it feels so void of life, said Taskin. You might meet a few where we are going, my lord, said Thilv. She addressed him as my lord instead of the Dark Lord. Michael grew quite tired of being called the Dark Lord by the elves sooner than he expected. Therefore he ordered them to call him like his subordinates and men, my lord. At first, the wood elves seemed reluctant, but after Michael ordered them, they changed how they addressed him. The three of them enjoyed their walk in peace. Instead of bringing a group of elves with him, Michael only brought Thilv and Taskin. This couple seemed competent and knew the forest like the back of their hands. Plus, Michael wanted to know more about the two wood elves. So the humans here worship me or any other god? Asked Michael. We don't know much about them, my lord. They live far, far away from the mother tree. We call them the water tribe, said Thilv. Because they live nearby water? Asked Michael as Thilv nodded. I want to meet them someday before I leave this world. Thilv and Taskin stopped walking when they heard Michael. They turned around worried. Are you going to leave us, my lord? Thilv's eyes watered. Taskin was actually stunned to see Thilv behave this way in front of the Dark Lord. She was a warrior with an iron heart. She was an alpha of their tribe before he married her. Seeing her show her vulnerable side surprised Taskin. I told you, there is entirely a new world out there where I must be. But fear not, I will visit you often. When the time comes, I will build a gateway connecting the world so people can travel between, said Michael. Speaking of the other world, Michael wondered how to leave this place without using badass points. Somehow Michael believed there was another way to get out of this world. The past Dark Lord may have left something for him since he seemed to leave a lot of things to guide Michael in his path. The God's world? Thilv asked with a completely stunned face. More like a messed up world where I have lots of enemies, Michael chuckled. Jokes aside, I do plan to bring you there. But not before I fix everything here. Clothing, for example, said Michael. My lord, what is wrong with our clothes? Thilv's naive question almost made Michael laugh, but he smiled and gestured at them to lead the way. Almost after 7 hours, the sun slowly descended toward the horizon. One would expect the forest to get dark, but on the contrary, the trees and vegetation around them glowed brighter. The luminescent leaves, mushrooms, and barks lit the forest like neon lights. Michael let Taskin and Thilv take some rest before continuing their journey. He lost track of time as he followed them behind deeper into the forest. Eventually, Michael noticed the veil of mist slowly appearing in his sight. We are getting closer to the spot, my lord, said Taskin. He looked a bit uncomfortable and borderline afraid. They were stranded far away from the mother tree and her protection. Usually, the wood elves would avoid traveling deep into the forest at any cost. All tribe elders prohibited venturing deeper into the forest as they believed it made the wood elves mad. Before we go further, put this on your face. Michael threw them black face masks with filters built within. They looked confused a bit until they saw Michael putting on the mask himself. After they put the masks on, they slowly walked through the fallen logs and knee-high vegetation. The deeper they went, the more they saw reddish leaves and trees instead of the bluish tree. Something turned the trees red, and Michael assumed the same thing that put the creatures to sleep. He looked around the trees and saw various creatures, such as rabbits, foxes, and even a green-furred tiger sleeping on the ground with its bellies up. The tiger purred, sleeping a few meters away from the trio. Don't make any sudden noise, Taskin warned Thilv as he crouched down to blend in with his surroundings. Michael followed the wood elves, and after a while, he felt like he was back in Demon's Grave where everything had a red hue like everything was drenched in blood. Not a single sound could be heard in that second. The eerie silence slowly turned into fear and anxiety. If Michael weren't here with them, Taskin and Thilv would have turned around and rushed out of this place instantly. But having their almighty God with them gave them enough courage to continue forward. They slowly walked past the sleeping tiger and arrived at a small pond. The crystal-clear water reflected the crimson-red surroundings, as well as the silver mushrooms with black stars on them. Michael's eyes lit up as these mushrooms were what he looked for the most. Pick these mushrooms as many as you can, said Michael, bent down to pick one from the ground. The silver mushroom let out a cry as though it had a mouth when Michael rooted it out from the ground. These mushrooms grew under the shady roof of the forest while berries lay ripening under the leafy dome of the forest like jewels. The grass was crispy under their feet. Every tree Michael saw was skyscraper tall. Good thing Vidora wasn't here, or they would have tried to pick and eat the fruits that shone like silver snowflakes. The forest smelled fresh and organic. Even Michael's mask couldn't stop the natural musty smell of forest from penetrating the filters and entering their nostrils. Anyone who didn't know about the forest and the plants would be tempted to pick some wild pears and eat them. However, Michael knew better than to eat anything in the forest around him, because every single tree, fruit, and plant was radiating a poisonous miasma that would put the brain in some kind of coma until they died. The creatures sleeping had developed a partial immune system to avoid death, but they couldn't avoid getting high. Thilv and Taskin followed Michael's hand movement and rooted out the mushrooms exactly how he did it. They put the mushrooms in a pile, wondering how they were going to bring them to the tribe. While Thilv and Taskin were harvesting the mushrooms, Michael went to the trees with red barks and scraped down the black moth growing on them. Michael hummed a tune of the song he heard back on Earth while collecting the moth in a glass jar. The little alchemist living inside him was utterly delighted to collect new ingredients to brew an entirely new potion that would put a full stop to poverty once and for all. This potion would serve as a new drug that makes people high, while not affecting their physical bodies. In other words, by taking this potion, nothing would change physically. The user would only feel mind-numbing pleasure and high for a short amount of time and crave more. Since Michael was not a drug dealer, he planned to brew an antidote to remove the craving and urge. Moreover, Michael planned to make this potion ridiculously expensive, so that only the rich and noble would be able to afford it. This way, the commoners would be spared by the new sensation drug he was about to make. It was only a temporary measure to enable the coin flow. His end goal was to invest in legit businesses and hotel chains, not dealing drugs. Even the Dark Lord had standards and limits. The last thing he wanted was to have a bunch of druggies roaming the streets of his beautiful world. He blamed Noah for closing down Majestic and Hades, which pushed him to go into the drug industry. As they were peacefully harvesting herbs and various ingredients in the forest, Thilv's ears twitched. She immediately stopped harvesting the mushrooms, turned around, and saw Taskin slowly reaching for his bow. It seemed like he heard the same rustling that she had heard just a moment ago. Taskin and Thilv looked over their shoulder to see Michael calmly walking around picking blueberries. "My lord," Taskin whispered, trying to get Michael's attention. "There is something approaching us." "Yes, I know that," Michael calmly answered Taskin. The brown sack into which Michael put the blueberries disappeared along with the pile of mushrooms on the ground. He then strolled toward Thilv and Taskin. "Stand back. I'll deal with it," said Michael. Unlike the wood elves, Michael was able to see the beast approaching them through his X-ray vision. Thilv and Taskin heard a strange gnawing sound. Soon, their noses twitched as the air began to reek of blood. They tried to see what was happening, but the foliage and the trees blocked their sight. But Michael could see everything. The beast was feasting on the sleeping tiger, which didn't even move an inch. The tiger was too high on the elements mixed in the air. Michael waited for the beast to finish feasting and approach them. He slowly drew his black sword from the sheath on his back. Somehow, the beast was immune to the air, unlike the tiger and the other creatures. Chapter 837. Fighting two beasts in the same day. Each moment felt like an eternity to Thilv and Taskin. They could hear their heartbeats slowly rising. Their eyes were fixed on the forest before them. Soon, the beast slowly stepped out of the cover of the trees and granted them a look at its body. Thilv and Taskin took a step back. The beast reminded Michael of the Komodo dragon back on Earth. It was a large lizard with long tails, a strong and agile neck, and sturdy limbs. The beast's tongue was red, forked, and oozed blood. It had a stone-color skin with distinct, large scales. SSSSSSS. The beast hissed at them but locked its gaze on Michael. Somehow, the beast sensed the real threat among the three was Michael. Perhaps the sword in his hand, or perhaps he himself threatened the beast. Michael felt Mother Luck was on his side today. While harvesting the ingredients, he pondered about the antidote. To brew an antidote, he needed something that was naturally immune to the air around him. That's where the beast came in. If he could get the beast's flesh and blood, he would be able to brew an antidote without a problem. Michael clenched his dark sword. One would be surprised to see the 3 dragons in his hilt wrap around his arms like they were alive and provide more grip. He didn't take out his second sword but decided to slice and dice the beast using one. Step by step, the beast strolled toward Michael. Phil and Taskin slowly walked backward while maintaining their focus on the beast. However, the beast only focused on Michael. When the beast was just a few meters away from Michael, it started to gallop, increasing its speed significantly. Suddenly, the beast pushed its legs into the ground and lunged at Michael with its mouth wide open. The poor beast had no idea how fast Michael could move. He just swayed his body to the side and dashed forward with his blade tilted to the side. Phil Van Taskin felt a gust of wind blow past him as one beast became 2. Michael's sword cut through the beast's body like a hot knife through butter. 2 halves of the beast hit the ground with a sickening thud. Blood sprayed out everywhere, including Michael, Phil Van Taskin. Michael sheathed his sword back into the sheath and turned around. The beast looked like neatly cut fish fillets. Except it had more blood, bits of pieces of the tiger it just ate, and entrails. Although the wood elves were shocked at how quickly the beast died, they weren't disgusted by the sight of its dead body. This told Michael that these wood elves had witnessed much worse. Good they aren't soft-bloods, Michael said to himself. He flicked his wrist as a dagger, and a glass jar appeared in his hand. Then Michael squatted beside the 2 halves of the body and carved out the beast's heart, flesh, and collected its blood into the jar. Once again, Michael hated the system for not giving him any experience points. But then again, killing a creature with no cultivation level was as easy as stepping on an ant. It was no challenge or thrill. After collecting the body parts of the beast, Michael turned his focus on the ingredients. "Shall we continue?" asked Michael as Phil Van Taskin snapped back to reality. They continued to collect the mushrooms. Hours passed without their notice. Michael enjoyed the momentary peace and quiet. Eventually, Michael picked enough mushrooms and harvested enough ingredients to get his potion business running for a few months. This time would be enough for him to earn gold coins and invest or build businesses to generate passive income. "It's enough," said Michael. Phil Van Taskin were sweating. The task exhausted them quite a bit. "If you don't mind me asking, my lord, what are you planning to do with all these? They seem poisonous," Taskin asked Michael. "They are. But with a little bit of magic, the mushrooms could be turned into something special," Michael answered as he strolled toward the pond. He washed his face in the crystal-clear water. Then he decided to return to the tribe. On the way back, Michael led them instead of the other way around. He memorized the path back to the tribe. Taskin and Phil followed him while cautiously looking around their surroundings. Almost after walking in peace and quiet for an hour, Michael slowed down. The red forest was far behind them, and they entered the forest part with sparkling blue trees. "Something wrong, my lord?" Taskin questioned Michael. "Climb up this tree and stay there." Michael pointed at the tall tree beside him. Taskin and Phil were bewildered, but they chose not to question their god. Taskin nodded as he put his back against the tree, boosted his wife to the top, and climbed up the tree with Phil's help. They used the branches and holes in the tree as stepping stones to reach the top. Michael leaned against the tree as though he was waiting for someone. Suddenly out of nowhere, an arrow soared through the air, piercing the veins, foliage, and saplings. The arrow almost hit Michael's wrist where he wore the Olympus. It didn't feel like whoever fired the arrow missed the mark, but targeted the Olympus precisely. But before the arrow could hit Olympus and shatter it to pieces, Michael caught the arrow just a few inches away from Olympus. Upon sitting on the highest branch in the tree, Phil Van Taskin were stunned. As far as they could see, no one was there. Still, the arrow came from somewhere. "You are good marksman. I give you that." Michael's voice swept across the forest. "Pity you are not as good as you think you are," said Michael. He was nonchalant about the arrow or who fired it. Ever since he stepped onto the demon's grave, he had a feeling someone was following him. Although the environmental scanning sensed nothing, his instincts told him that he was being followed. Yet again, his instincts were spot on. Whoosh! Michael heard the sound of the whistling wind as another arrow came from another direction. Not even a second passed when another arrow soared through the forest from the opposite direction of the previous arrow. Michael caught the 2 arrows just in time before they hit Olympus. "Whoever you are, you want a fair fight. Am I right?" asked Michael. Arch energy from the crystals amplified Michael's voice to the point the creatures around him scattered away in fear. The arrows stopped. Then, Michael threw away the arrows and removed Olympus from his wrist. He had a feeling the one who fired the arrows was watching everything. Michael placed the Olympus on the ground and waited for the person to show themselves. Silence fell over them. A few seconds later, the vegetation around Michael rustled. Thrive, and Taskin noticed something big and black approaching them. The figure lurked in the shadows and seemed to hide itself using the shadows. They perfectly blended with the forest despite how colorful the forest was. Stay up there, Michael said to Taskin and Thilv when they seemed reluctant to stay still, and let Michael handle the shadowy figure. The rustling noises pounded louder and louder as the figure finally stepped out of the shadows. Thilv and Taskin were caught off guard. Simply put, they were stunned. It was a giant black panther that walked on its 2 feet like a human. Michael remained calm as the black panther cautiously made his way toward Michael, but kept a safe distance. When Taskin and Thilv looked closer, the black panther had more humanoid features than they initially saw. He had the face of a panther and shiny black fur, but his muscles and limbs looked more human than those of a panther. His black tail swayed with the wind. The black panther's eyes glistened with immense killing intent. Michael could feel the murderous lust radiating from the panther. Where did I see you before? Michael rubbed his chin. The black panther became more furious, seeing how calm Michael looked. However, except for his eyes, nothing betrayed the anger within the black panther's heart. It was a trait of a seasoned warrior. Michael was sure of that. They both slowly started to walk in a circle, while maintaining eye contact. Michael snapped his fingers as his eyes brightened. You were with Tanulia Valrin, the invisible bodyguard. I knew I'd seen you somewhere, said Michael. But the rage within your eyes, it feels personal. Like I took away someone you loved. Don't tell me you were in love with Tanulia, Michael snickered. Nah, Michael shook his head. It's much more, Jacoby. The Black Panther finally opened his mouth. His voice sounded extremely thick and gritty. Since there were no beast men in Itanes and Taskin and Thilv had never seen one, they were completely shocked. Their god looked smaller compared to the 7-feet monstrosity riddled with muscles. Yet, they saw no fear in the Dark Lord's eyes. Not that they expected a god to be afraid of a cat. Jacoby. Michael tilted his head, trying to recall the name. Sorry, no idea, Michael shrugged. Of course, Michael remembered Jacoby. Even if he didn't know the name, the Black Panther had a resemblance with only one person Michael had met, the one who tried to hunt down Gaia and almost succeeded. Everything started to make sense except how this Black Panther managed to not only enter the demon's grave, but also come here. I shall make you remember then. Ghost. The Black Panther addressed Michael by his name instead of the Dark Lord. Before he disappeared, he was tracking Gaia, the Queen of Nagaland. Did you kill him? Asked the Black Panther. Michael could tell the Black Panther wanted some closure. He might be a good tracker, but he couldn't have found Jacoba's body because Michael burned it to ashes. The moment he agreed to track down Gaia, he sealed his own fate. But did I kill him? Michael rubbed his chin, pretending to think. Looking at the Black Panther and Michael, Thilv and Taskin were utterly confused. But judging by their words, they could understand that there was some kind of history between the two of them. Chapter 838 Cat and the Way Back Home. Defeat me in a duel, and I might tell you what I did to Jacoby, Michael snickered. Thilv and Taskin froze when they felt the stillness in the air. Something was about to go down, and they felt it in every fiber of their being. Michael swayed to the side and bent his back as he heard the twang of a bowstring. An arrow flew above Michael's head and struck the tree behind him. Michael looked up to see the Black Panther on the tree branch. In a blink of an eye, the Black Panther managed to leap onto the branch, getting a higher ground to attack Michael with his bow. The Black Panther nimble jumped to another branch. Then he descended to a lower branch and swung himself to another tree. His movements were graceful, so Michael could tell he had years of training. Michael drew his sword and deflected the arrows without breaking a sweat. Seeing the arrows causing no harm to him, the Black Panther rolled down from the tree and dashed at Michael. Michael jumped in the air before the Black Panther could cut his throat with the arrow he was about to fire. Then, the Black Panther took out a pair of jade daggers. He quickly changed course after his initial attack failed. With speed beyond anything or anyone Thilv and Taskin witnessed, the Black Panther lunged at Michael. The serrated edge of the blade grazed Michael's shoulder. But the knife barely cut the skin for the blood to seep through. Then it was Michael's turn. Michael brought down the black sword toward the top of the Black Panther's head. He quickly raised his daggers in an X above his head to block the black sword. But the Black Panther knew how sharp and strong the black sword was. He quickly, almost at the speed of lightning, deflected the sword using the daggers. Then Michael swung his left fist at the Black Panther's face. He had to bring down his hand to block his fist. As Michael expected, the Black Panther instinctively lowered his hand to block the fist. Before the panther could cut Michael's fist with his dagger, Michael swung the black sword, nicking the side of his face. Then Michael lashed out and kicked the panther's knee. SSSHHHH. The panther hissed in pain. Without giving the panther time to retaliate, Michael dashed at the Black Panther, slamming him against the tree behind. The entire tree shuddered, shedding half of its sparkling leaves. Any weak man would have had his ribs crushed by sheer force. However, the beastmen were built differently. They were far stronger, faster, and more agile compared to humans. Even when he was slammed against the tree, the Black Panther managed to flick his dagger, cutting Michael in the wrist. The sharp pain caused Michael to lose grip on the black sword. It flew away from Michael and landed on the ground with a thud. Michael hated losing his sword as he grabbed both the panther's wrists and slammed them against the tree once again. This time the panther lost the daggers. "Not as weak as you thought, isn't it?" Michael asked, holding the panther against the tree. Every muscle in Michael's body bulged. His ripped body stunned even Taskin. Clearly, the Black Panther underestimated Michi, raw strength. He and Gaia trained their physical bodies every single day like clockwork. Since he was an alchemist, Michael supplemented his body with healthy foods and potions to reach the peak of his physical strength. So even without celestial energy or arch energy, Michael was far stronger than any human at the same cultivation stage as him. The Black Panther groaned to muster every bit of his strength and head-butted Michael to escape his hold. Michael's nose cracked with a sickening crunch as the Black Panther leaped away from Michael. He needed to put some distance and re-evaluate his strategies to win against such a powerful opponent. Thilv and Taskin looked at the battle with horrified looks in their eyes. They witnessed their god bleed. The words Michael spoke about powerful people and enemies rang inside their brains. They could only imagine how powerful these people would be to make even a god bleed. The panther heard Michael chuckling instead of groaning in pain. He slowly turned around and slapped the broken nose to align the cracked bones to their place. The blood stain on his front teeth and the villainous smile made Michael look evil. The panther slowly realized why the entire world was afraid of him. If he had no brother to avenge, he would have avoided clashing with such a terrifying being. Not that he was afraid of the Dark Lord, but unlike his brother, Jacoby, he avoided crossing paths with people like the Dark Lord, who would go to any lengths to seek revenge. It was too late for both of them. This feud could only be settled by blood. Michael wiped off the blood before dashing at the panther once again. Fist met fist. Their fists clashed in the forest, and their feet danced beneath them. The Black Panther was quick, but so was Michael, despite removing the Olympus. Michael landed more blows on the panther than the panther did. Each punch created a heavy thud upon hitting their bodies. Their clash decimated everything below them, and created a circle of dead plants. Several trees had human and cat-shaped holes and fist-sized holes. Although the panther provided some extent of challenge, he was nowhere near defeating Michael. Ever since someone from the Vampire Death Squad called the Puma almost defeated Michael in close combat, because he used Counter-Serpent Mega, Michael was altering and perfecting his fighting technique. Coupled with Michael's brute strength, agility, and cat-like reflex, only a few people in the world could fight him head-to-head and survive. After a while, the panther started to breathe heavily as his movements became wobbly. The system level is too low to answer the question. The system's answer disappointed Michael. How do I use dash? Michael halted his question as he suddenly remembered the copper ring left behind by the past Dark Lord. He had a feeling that the copper ring might open a portal using the coin. But it was not the time for him to test the theory. There were so many unknowns in Itines and the demon's grave. For now, getting home safely took high priority. However, before he could leave, he had to visit the ash field and see what Skyhall was up to. With few things and many questions in his head, Michael strolled toward where he put the Olympus, picked it up, and wore it around his wrist. The Olympus was not the only thing he picked from the ground. He also picked up the arrows left behind by the panther, who was called the cat by his people. "You can come down," Michael said to Thilvan Taskin. After wearing the Olympus, Michael just raised his hand as the black sword that slipped off his hand flew straight back to his hand. "Now that was one of the many people I have to kill back on my world," Michael said to the Wood Elves with a calm smile. Chapter 839 Crafting Crossbows for the Elves. By the time Michael returned to the tribe, the sun had almost fallen into the horizon. He leaped from the ground to comfortably land on the wooden platform above the ground. "My lord!" Kirat and the other Wood Elves bowed toward Michael. After nodding at them, Michael strolled to his throne and saw Vidora lying on it belly up. The throne was littered with bits and pieces of fruits and bare bones of fish. Iag snored as a trail of drool trickled down her mouth. Michael lifted them up from the throne and raised his hand as a gust of wind blew past the throne. The wind blast cleaned his throne. Michael plunged onto the throne and took out the coin he picked from the panther. He fiddled with the coin until Iag, Sarba, and Cain slowly opened their eyes. Sarba rubbed the sleep off of his eyes. When their visions cleared, they saw the dark lines on Michael's forehead. It was obvious he had met some trouble while they were feasting and living like a god. "What is that?" Iag asked, looking at the coin in his hand. Sarba turned his gaze. He saw a strange glow coming from within the coin. "Do you remember the beast man who tried to capture Gaia on Zanalis' behalf?" Michael asked Vidora. "What of him? Don't tell me he's alive somehow." Iag frowned. "Someone in his tribe followed me here." "This coin belongs to him," said Michael. Sarba's jaw dropped slightly. They all pushed their questions and doubts to the corner of their minds and asked Michael what had happened. Michael told them everything, starting from the invisible guard he saw near Tenulia to the powerful vortex that appeared to save the panther. The panther's disappearance left Michael with more questions than answers. He knew the Skyhall built a portal to reach Itines somehow, but it was no portal that saved the panther. Someone created the vortex, and they didn't want Michael to have the coins. The Dark Lord said killing monsters in the demon's grave would make some asshole stronger. I wonder if that asshole is the same one who created the vortex. "It seems like he has control over the demon's grave," said Cain. As usual, Cain and Michael shared the same thought. But what Michael didn't know was that the asshole was another god, god of time and space, Andor. In his previous life, Andor was his arch-nemesis. At that time, Michael was the only god who was able to stop Andor, but the price Michael paid to defeat Andor was a little too much. Before resetting the universe, the Dark Lord ensured Andor wouldn't hurt his new self since he would be at his weakest. He placed an array above the mortal realm, preventing Andor from returning home and bringing the other gods to the mortal world. If Andor ever wanted to get back, he needed Michael. "We need to get more answers before we leave this world," said Michael. "Speaking of answers, we heard the Wood Elves climb the Mother Tree to get the Dark Lord's blessings. We also heard those who successfully climbed to the top heard the voice of the Dark Lord. What if he had left another recording for you at the top? It might help us shed some light on things," said Iag. She sounded surprisingly intelligent. Michael almost wondered whether the fruits she devoured had some influence on her brain cells. Because normally, Iag preferred to attack the problem than think about it. "They would be worried if we depart now. Let's head out there tomorrow. According to the elves, the Mother Tree is on the way to the ash field. We should climb up there, see what's there, and then head to the ash field," said Sarba. Michael rubbed his chin for a moment before agreeing to Sarba's suggestion. "Besides, we need to find a way to dress up these elves." Some of the girls said the tribe loses at least 10 elves yearly to the winter, Sarba said with concern for the elves. Michael had been thinking about the clothing issue for some time. However, buying clothes for the elves from the system was out of the question because it not only cost quite a lot of badass points, but he had also taken a loan from the system. It left him with only one option: He had to buy clothes from his world and bring them here. But to do that, he needed a portal connecting items in his castle, where he planned to build the portal. I am a blacksmith and an alchemist, not a tailor. I cannot solve their problem until we find a way to travel back and forth. As they were discussing the clothing issue, Karat and a few girls came carrying a wooden platter filled with various fruits, boiled fish, and what seemed to be roots. My lord, please accept this, Karat bowed. Thank you. Michael took the platter from Karat and thanked them, which stunned the elves. Have everyone eaten yet? Michael asked Karat. The warmth the elves felt from his words could not be described with mere words. Their hearts were filled with such joy and delight. We will eat later on, my lord, said Karat, controlling his tears from escaping his eyes. Sylvia here told us, they haven't had meat in months. Iag looked at the brown-haired elf and said. The elven girl trembled. Lady Iag. The girl scowled as Iag let out a devilish grin. Is it true, Karat? Don't you guys go hunting? Karat sighed before answering Michael. We used to, my lord. But we lost our entire hunter group to the demons. Without them, hunting for the meat has become too dangerous. After hearing Karat, Michael placed the silver platter on the throne's hand and stood up. Tonight we are having meat. I am going hunting, and there will be no negotiation. Did I hear the word meat? Yee, I meat. The children immediately became delighted to hear Michael. Many gasped and bounced in joy, especially children who hadn't had meat for months. The one who grinned the widest was Iag. Unlike the elves, Iag didn't go without meat for months, but just a week. However, in her mind, a week was just as long as a couple of years. Michael gathered up the men in the time, including Taskin. Soon, all the male elves in the tribe gathered around Michael. Karat, where do you get your bows? Michael asked the old elf. We make our own, my lord, said Karat. Before we go hunting, I want you to bring all the planks and wood logs you used to craft the bows. A couple of elves jumped down from their tribe and headed outside to bring everything Michael needed. The elves were curious to see why Michael suddenly asked for logs and planks. A few minutes later, the elves returned carrying wooden planks and logs that had a rosy tint to the wood. In addition, they also brought rolls of rope they used to make strings. After they placed the planks and logs before Michael, he gestured at the elves to take a few steps back. Then he unsheathed the dark swords and started to carve the wood. The gears in Michael's inventor side of the brain worked at full capacity. Every move Michael made had a certain grace to it. He often entered the system and brought a few additional parts for the thing he was building. Under the elves' curious gazes, Michael effortlessly built not one but 5 crossbows. It had been some time since he put his inventor skill to good use. Now that he had a forge and the blacksmith trait, he would be able to build more powerful weapons. Underwater torpedo for Big Bertha was just an example. Michael was able to build these beautiful recurve crossbows with the common materials found in items. He decorated the limbs with ebony details and ended in rounded curves ornamented with wrapped leather. The stock was wrapped in glistening blue leaves commonly found in the forest. Since Michael felt generous, he crafted a long quiver for every crossbow using deer hide. He decorated the outside with animal horns. In the hands of any archer, this bow was capable of firing arrows up to 70 meters while still retaining lethal power. What is this, my lord? Taskin asked Michael. Watch. Michael raised the crossbow, knocked an arrow into the barrel, and aimed at a tree almost 20 meters away from them. Move aside. Iag flew through the crowd and pushed them aside from the bolt's trajectory. When the elves cleared out from his path, Michael pulled the trigger. Whoosh. As soon as Michael pulled the trigger, the bolt shot out of the crossbow, creating an acute swish. The bolt soared through the air and hit the tree Michael aimed in a blink of an eye. It penetrated deep into the bark and jerked for a moment. Considering Taskin and most of the wood elves were skilled archers, they were speechless to see the speed and the power of the crossbow. You can fire a bolt up to 70 meters. I built it in a way you do not have to worry about wind direction. Just aim and fire. Michael demonstrated how to reload the crossbow and fired another bolt farther than the previous one. When he first arrived at his new world from the earth, he had a hard time hitting the targets using a bow and arrows. Of course, he could hit the targets in close range, But the cultivators used arch energy to hit targets beyond what a normal human being could hit. Thanks to Gaia and practice, he became a deadly marksman. He still had a long way to go to reach Gaia's level. She was a frickin' beast when it came to long-range combat. One time, he saw Gaia hit a drone flying through dark clouds in a storm from 500 meters away. He doubted he could reach her level without the system's help. She was a natural-born marksman. Many elves gasped in shock, and then their eyes sparkled, hoping they would get one from Michael. "I will make more soon. For now, I'll let Karat decide who gets one," said Michael. Chapter 840 Death of Vidora. The next day, Michael prepared to head for the ash field. When Michael returned to the tribe from meditating on the hilltop he first arrived at, he saw the wood elves snoring loudly and sleeping like babies. Last night, they feasted on all kinds of meat after Michael and Taskin brought enough meat to serve them all. Michael himself barbecued the meat and served his devotees. He enjoyed taking a break from all the pressure of being the Dark Lord, and enjoyed the feast with the wood elves. The meat from the game in Itenes tasted way better than the game back in his world. Apparently, the deer-like animal with a glowing belly infested the forest and grazed the vegetation without control. Their natural predators ran deeper into the forest, and many fell victim to the red forest, and were eaten by the lizard-like beast. If he hunted them down, he would be doing a favor to the forest and the wood elves. He did plan to hunt them down after he opened up Hades again using another name. "Wake up." Michael landed beside his throne to see Iag drooling on his throne. He tapped all three heads and woke them up. "Juicy meat, want more?" Iag mumbled for a moment before falling back to deep slumber. She reminded Michael of Gaia as he smiled. Michael lost count of the times he had to carry her to the bed from the top of the mountain they trained often. Waking up Gaia without getting his face bruised was the toughest challenge he faced every day. The first few times she anciently punched him in the face, she woke up and apologized. But later on, she would just laugh and say he deserved it for waking her up early. Now Iag acted just like her, minus the getting punched in the face. "My lord." Kirat strolled toward Michael, navigating through the sleeping wood elves. Instead of returning to their homes, all the elves fell asleep on the spacious wooden platform. This village was an architectural marvel. They managed to build numerous wooden homes, bridges, lift systems, and a large wood platform in the center anchored to several trees. Every time he saw the village, he remembered the dark elven village. They almost looked the same, but the magical forest and the wood elves' kindness added charm and beauty to this village. "I should wake these good-for-nothing elves," Kirat scowled. He felt offended to see them sleeping while their god was long awake. "It's okay. Let them sleep. I know how it feels to sleep without worry in the world. I almost miss that feeling," Michael said while keeping a straight face. "Where is the breakfast?" Iag asked, yawning. Her jaw opened wide, making Michael worried that it would get stuck. "You are not in the castle," said Michael as Iag rubbed the sleep off her eyes. She heaved a sigh of disappointment when the realization hit her. "I should fetch you something to eat right this instant, Lady Iag." "No." Michael stopped Karat with a wave of his hand. "I'll get them something on the way to the mother tree," said Michael. He avoided telling Karat the full truth that he was on his way to the ash field. To the wood elves, the ash field was a forbidden land. No one alive in the tribe had visited or even seen the place. According to Taskin, the ash field was far north of the mother tree and relatively closer to some orc tribes. He didn't think the orcs would step onto the ash field or anyone for that matter. Simply put, Michael learned nothing about the ash field from the elves, and it seemed like no one knew about the place, which made Michael more curious. "I'll be back when I can," said Michael before slowly ascending into the air. "We will wait for your arrival, my lord." Kirat bowed as Michael shot through the canopy and disappeared from Kirat's sight. After leaving the tribe, Michael cast the lightning dash. Kirat vaguely saw a streak of black lightning in the sky and stared at the sky until the lightning faded away. In the sky, Michael was on his way to the mother tree at full speed. Vidora wrapped their tail tightly around Michael's neck and tried not to fall down. Everything around them seemed blurry due to Michael's speed. When things cleared up, they reached the mother tree. Even when Michael was way higher from the ground, the top of the tree seemed far away. The tree spanned as far as one could see. A sparkling canopy overshadowed the blue sky itself. It would take a couple of the tallest buildings on Earth to be stacked on top of each other to reach the mother tree's height. Michael wanted to see the tree at night, where it would radiate like a giant neon tube light. How did Taskin climb to the top? And how the hell does anyone climb to the top? Ayag's neck ached just by looking up at the tree. The mere thought of climbing the tree without using energy seemed absurd to her. Resilience, said Michael. You can do almost anything if you put your mind to it. Michael slowly hovered toward the tree, while noticing the empty castle ground and campsite around the mother tree. As Michael expected, the old woman kept her word. The Skyhall soldiers finally vacated the once the holy ground of the Wood Elves. We should take over the castle, Ayag suggested after looking at the empty castle. However, Michael firmly shook his head. No. This place used to be holy, and I will keep it that way. The moment we build a portal connecting this world to ours, I am razing everything the Skyhall made to the ground. For now, Michael didn't want to start a wildfire that would engulf everything, including the mother tree itself. Besides, there might be something inside the castle he could use against the Skyhall. Even though Michael doubted the old woman would have left something, she didn't seem like someone who would make such a careless mistake. Michael increased his speed to reach the top faster, but didn't fly at his full speed because he didn't want to miss any clues. As he was flying toward the top of the tree, Michael noticed several birds with strange designs on their body and colorful eyes that glowed like jewels. He had never seen such exotic birds before. They all scattered away and flew into the holes in the mother tree's branches as wide as a typical big tree. The tree was home to unknown species and had its own unique ecosystem. His love for Itenes surged to the point he realized why the past Dark Lord had taken such interest in Itenes. What Michi didn't know was the past Dark Lord did not only simply take an interest in this world, but protected the world from Andor and his schemings. He had to kill someone he cared dearly to save this world from getting destroyed. Almost after 30 minutes, Michael reached the top, where 11 branches branched out from the center that looked like an elegant garden. These branches looked like pillars that held the canopy on their backs. Michael felt a pleasant chill on his feet when he landed on the grass field. Birds chirped in the distance as Michael strolled toward something that looked man-made. To be precise, it was a giant stone pillar entangled by veins and moths. It didn't feel like he was on top of a tree. Instead, it felt like he was walking in a hall made of Mother Nature herself. Everything around him was untouched by death and destruction caused by the Skyhall. He didn't think the Skyhall soldiers ever managed to reach this place. They would have if they could use arch energy. Thank the gods they couldn't. Otherwise, the Skyhall soldiers would have hunted down the bright blue feathered birds watching him just for their feathers. Michael's full focus was on the stone pillar. The closer he got to the pillar, the more he felt a strange energy coming from it. When Michael reached the almost 7 feet tall pillar, he grabbed the veins coiling around and pulled them apart. It took him a few seconds to completely get rid of the veins. Finally, Michael was able to see the stone pillar clearly. What he saw engraved in the stone pillar rendered him speechless. His heart almost skipped a beat. For a brief moment, Michael's mind just went blank. The reason for Michael's complete shock was the engraving of a man with 2 swords fighting a 3-headed hydra hundreds of times the size of him. That was only a part of the mural. Below that, they saw the fallen hydra and the man kneeling before its body, presumably exhausted after a battle. It can't be real. It's not. It must be Mugashuku, Ayag muttered as Kane slowly shook his head. Mugashuku is a 4-headed hydra. That would be us unless there was another 3-headed hydra in existence, said Kane. Then that's not Ghost. It must be someone else. Ayag's eyes watered. Look at the swords he was holding. Kane pointed at the swords. Although the swords seemed small, they could see the 3 dragons in the hilt, looking exactly the same as Michael's dark swords. Michael had no words as he was in utter shock. If the mural was something that happened in the past, to be precise, happened to the past Dark Lord, it meant the past Dark Lord fought and killed Vidora. But why? That was the question that drilled his brain to the core. He knew the past Dark Lord's life was kind of fucked up. Yet Michael never imagined it would be fucked to the point he had to fight and kill Vidora. Vidora was family to him. There must be more to this, Sarba stuttered. He would never hurt Ghost, and he knew his siblings wouldn't too. We don't have to freak out. I said this is Ghost, but I didn't say it's our ghost. Kane's words somehow managed to calm down Ayag and Sarba. But what happened between us that made us fight to the death? Asked Sarba. Chapter 841 by Ning's Fear. Please be careful. Inside a cozy room draped with sky-blue curtains, the old woman Michael met at the castle talked to a girl in a mirror. The girl's figure slowly faded out of existence after the old woman waved her hand. After the girl's figure vanished, the mirror reflected the old woman's figure. The girl who just disappeared was none other than Rowena Winsitten, the Holy Maiden, and the old woman Michael met was her maid by Ning. Despite how frail the old woman looked with her wrinkly skin and hunched back, she was an immortal at level 10. However, she suppressed her cultivation stage to make herself look like a fusion stage warrior to most of the Sky Hall soldiers. At that moment, Bai Ning resided in a quickly built cabin in an ash field. She was tasked to supervise the dig site where they were supposed to find something that could rival the Dark Lord himself in a battle. Do not come back without results, Bai Ning. Bai Ning heard a thunderous voice in her head. She immediately dropped to her knees when she heard the voice. Almost instantly, sweat beads formed on her face, and she remained on her knees for a few long moments. She had only feared 3 people in her life: the Holy Maiden, the Dark Lord, and this mysterious Lord of the Sky Hall. Bai Ning didn't fear the first 2 as much as she feared the latter because Rowena and the Dark Lord were still weak compared to her. The same could not be said of the mysterious Lord. He could end her and the entire Sky Hall with a snap of his fingers. Even the great elders of the Sky Hall feared him. Luckily for most others, they didn't know such a person existed. Many thought, including the Holy Maiden herself, that Holy Maiden was the highest rank. However, the truth was that there existed someone above the Holy Maiden. The most powerful great elders served him and feared him more than they did the Holy Maiden. Deep down, Bai Ning didn't want to see this mysterious lord in person. Instead, she was quite happy serving him from the shadows. Bai Ning hoped that the Holy Maiden would bend her knees to this mysterious lord when the time came, though Bai Ning didn't think that would happen, judging by Rowena's temperament. Even after the voice's effect on her faded, Bai Ning couldn't get back to her feet. Eventually, she managed to muster enough strength to stand up and leave the cabin. Bai Ning heaved a sigh as she strolled toward the wooden door and twisted the golden knob. As soon as the door opened, she was welcomed by an alarming sight. Lightning struck close to her and all around the place again and again. The sky roared as an eternal thunderstorm dominated this realm. Strange sounds erupted from behind Bai Ning, perhaps 2 beings fighting each other or a collapsing landscape. In spite of the treacherous landscape, she got the feeling she was not in immediate danger. This place was no walk in the park, but at the very least, she should be able to survive for a couple of weeks. The men she brought from Sky Hall, and those who occupied the mother tree were doing typical labor such as carrying crates, erupting tents to survive the thunderstorm, and digging holes everywhere as though they were searching for something. It was tough for Bai Ning to see through the ashen air. The entire place had an eerie crimson-red hue to it. Bai Ning decided to go out there and look at how the digging process was going in person. Cupping the mother tree was just a secondary task. Their main task was to dig up something that the mysterious lord ordered the great elders to do. With the equipment coming from Sky Hall and extra manpower, Bai Ning believed they could find whatever was hiding in the ash field. You have 3 weeks. Bai Ning's mind replayed the words spoken to her by the mysterious lord. Initially, when they first arrived at Itani's 2 months ago, she had no worries or pressure. The mysterious lord rarely bothered to speak to her. But imagine her surprise when the Dark Lord himself came to pay her a visit. Then, all hell broke loose. Something inside the mysterious lord broke after he heard the Dark Lord's name. Bai Ning lived long enough to tell when someone was feeling overwhelming killing intent. She didn't know the history between the Dark Lord and the mysterious lord, but one thing was certain. The mysterious lord had deep hatred toward the Dark Lord. Curse you to hell, Dark Lord. Bai Ning cursed Michael under her breath and went to meet the captain of this unit. A few meters away from her, a group of silver-armored soldiers was digging the ground using shovels, while another group was carrying an unconscious soldier toward one of the tents. Lady Bai Ning. The elven captain noticed Bai Ning and dropped his shovel. Captain Fenian, how's the digging going? Asked Bai Ning. Because of the thunderstorm and the howling wind, they had to speak louder than they were used to. We are losing more and more soldiers, Lady Bai Ning. The air is getting more and more toxic the more we dig, Lady Bai Ning. ID suggests we bring more equipment and wait till our scholars find a way to filter the air, said Fenian. But Bai Ning firmly shook her head. Not an option, Captain. The order came from the top. If we don't show results to the higher-ups in 2 weeks, it'd be our heads that roll on the table. Bai Ning didn't give a damn about the soldiers. As far as she was concerned, they were all expendable. At this rate, we won't have enough men to dig, Lady Bai Ning. We have already lost half of our men to the Dark Lord, and many of the survivors fell sick to the toxic air. Fenian raised his voice. Unlike Bai Ning, he cared about his men. Dying came up with being a soldier, but Fenian preferred dying with honor on the battlefield to digging for something. Have they taken the purification pills? Asked Bai Ning. They have, Lady Bai Ning, but the pills seem to lose their effect when they dig deeper into the ground. Maybe we tell the Holy Maiden about this. And oh, Bai Ning didn't realize she had raised her voice to the point it sounded louder than thunderclaps. The soldiers stopped what they were doing and turned their gazes to Bai Ning. Back to work. Bai Ning ordered the gazing soldiers as they quickly returned to their work. Captain Fenian, you are to tell the Holy Maiden about this under no circumstances. She hasn't ascended to the throne of the Holy Maiden yet. If she knew of this and caused a ruckus among the elders, her ascension would be hindered. I don't think I have to explain the politics in Sky Hall. Fenian creased his sword-like brows. As much as he hated hiding things from the Holy Maiden, Lady Bai Ning's words made sense to him. Besides, he knew Lady Bai Ning cared about the Holy Maiden more than anyone in the Sky Hall. If she thought telling the Holy Maiden about the ash field was not a good idea, Fenian had to obey her order. The only thing that worried Fenian was the lives of his men. Many thought the Sky Hall was a single entity and functioned as one. But it was only half the truth. The reality was that Sky Hall was politically scattered into various groups inside. For instance, some believed in and served the Holy Maiden wholeheartedly, like Fenian, while some wanted to change the hierarchy and form a circle of elders. Another group consisted of the most powerful elders who knew about the mysterious Lord's existence, and they served him, only him. I know losing your men hurts, Captain. But if we don't do this, we will lose way more to the Dark Lord. You saw what he did to those poor souls. Bai Ning sympathized with Fenian, while low-key manipulating him using the Dark Lord. Fenian sighed as he looked around at his men for a moment. He could only feel pity for the men who were digging down as they were ordered without having any idea they were about to die. Rather, even if they knew they would die, they wouldn't disobey their orders. It'd be helpful and even reduce the number of casualties if we knew what we are looking for here, Lady Bai Ning. Hearing his words, Bai Ning could only sigh. You'd be the first one to know when or if they tell me, Captain. Also, I have another task for you. What is it? Asked Fenian. I want you to go to the human tribes in this world and gather as much information as you can about them. I need to know their lifestyle, who or what they worship, and how many people are in their tribe. Bai Ning paused for a second and continued. The Wood Elves are lost cause. We have to stop more people from following the Dark Lord here. If we had natives of this world doing our work, the Dark Lord wouldn't have killed them as he killed our soldiers. He still has a soft spot for his own race, and we should exploit it if push comes to shove. When should I leave? Fenian asked Bai Ning. He knew he would be more useful in collecting information that could give them an advantage over the Dark Lord than digging holes and looking at his soldiers fall one by one. Subconsciously, Fenian didn't want to be here and deal with the guilt. No time like the present, Captain. What if the Dark Lord breaks the deal and comes here, Lady Bai Ning? Bai Ning chuckled. He won't break the deal, but he will come here to see what we are up to. In fact, I'd say he's on his way as we speak. You go and get ready to leave, Captain. I'll deal with the Dark Lord. Chapter 842 World-Ending Monster. Bai Ning supervised the digging after Captain Fenian left the ash field to gather information on the humans in Itanes. As time passed, more and more people fell sick to the toxicity in the air. Even the soldiers at the fusion stage collapsed like a lump of coal. After seeing almost 15 soldiers fall to their death, Bai Ning wondered what the hell she was ordered to dig up. As much as she liked to know the answer, she could not contact the great elders or the mysterious lord. Only they contacted her, not the other way around. Lady Bai Ning. The old woman heard an elated shout from a few meters away. She quickened her steps as a group of soldiers gathered around a crater they had dug. They found something, the silver-armored soldier sitting on the edge said, bowing his head toward her. Bai Ning approached the edge and looked down. Some of the soldiers were lying in the red sand unconscious, as the remaining soldiers slowly dug something up. Bring that to me. Bai Ning raised her voice. The soldiers carried something gray and heavy. From her point of view, the object had no distinguishable shape. It took 5 soldiers to carry the object to Bai Ning. The soldiers groaned and panted heavily. A couple of soldiers from above ran downhill to help the soldiers carry the object upwards. Finally, the soldiers managed to bring the object upside and placed it before Bai Ning. The old woman squatted beside the object. Thud. Some of the soldiers who carried the object to them fell down and rolled down the crater. However, Bai Ning didn't give a damn about them. Her full focus was on the object before her. What is it? Bai Ning mumbled under her breath. She slowly ran her fingers through the object. Because it was under the ground for so long, its surface was blanketed with a thick layer of dirt. She rubbed off the dirt as much as she could. The soldiers helped her with brushes and tiny tools they used to remove the dirt. Then, the object started to take the shape of a triangle. The bottom of the object had cracks, and seemed like a part of it was missing. Judging by the smoothness and the shape, Bai Ning had a feeling that this might be a broken tooth. Lady Bai Ning. As she was pondering about the object, she heard another shout. This time, a group of soldiers carried a 6-feet-long pillar toward Bai Ning. They placed the pillar with a heavy thud. To Bai Ning's surprise, the pillar and the object on the ground seemed to have been made of the same material. Bai Ning looked up as she saw the pointy end of the pillar, and felt a chill running down her spine. It is a tooth, Bai Ning muttered. The pointy end, the shape, and the cracks on the surface, everything pointed to one thing, a tooth. She wouldn't have come to this conclusion if she hadn't seen dragons in real life. But the tooth was too big to be a dragon's unless the dragon was almost 200 meters tall. There was no mention of a 200-meter dragon in any texts, and according to her knowledge, a dragon could not grow to that size. It was biologically impossible. Bai Ning's jaw dropped a few inches as she looked around the ash field, shocked to the core. At the moment, the biggest creature alive was Mugashuku, aka the dormant hydra in the southern continent. As far as Bai Ning could tell, the tooth belonged to an ancient beast bigger than Mugashuko. We are standing in the graveyard of an ancient beast, Bai Ning mumbled. Her mind cancelled out all the sounds around her. The eerie silence rooted strongly into her heart as fear crept down her spine slowly. If the tooth alone was 6 feet tall, she could only imagine how monstrous the beast would have been in real life. Take this to my tent and keep digging. Bai Ning snapped back to reality after briefly being in shock. Then, she took her gaze from the tooth to the soldiers around her. Scatter the demon caskets you have dug out, Bai Ning ordered the soldiers. Her tone contained a sense of urgency. Yes, Lady Bai Ning. The soldiers quickly nodded and carried the tooth to Bai Ning's tent. Meanwhile, the rest hurried toward the largest tent on the field to take out the demon caskets they stored there. Even on their way to the tent, some soldiers fell unconscious. While the soldier who was carrying the tooth to Bai Ning's tent wobbled as their legs felt weak. The radiation coming from the tooth was too much for the soldiers to handle. If she wasn't an immortal, she might have lost consciousness to the radiation. Bai Ning watched the soldiers carry out their words despite their comrades falling down like flies. Their loyalty and devotion toward the Sky Hall were truly remarkable. She had lived for centuries, and every generation of soldiers had the same devotion toward Sky Hall. They could only defeat the looming threat, the Dark Lord, with firm devotion and undying loyalty. Otherwise, the Dark Lord would corrupt their soldiers and turn those soldiers against them. Do not underestimate him. Bai Ning recalled the Great Elder's words. They were stronger than the Dark Lord, yet they avoided fighting with him. Instead, they believed the mysterious Lord's words. He wanted no one except Noah to fight the Dark Lord. Even an immortal like her shuddered when she saw him up close. When she was talking to the Dark Lord, she felt like staring at death itself. The darkness in his eyes tested her will to speak a word against him. Reading texts about the Dark Lord and witnessing his atrocities in person was as different as the sky and earth. Just thinking about him made her shudder, especially after learning what was beneath them. No matter what, she could not let the Dark Lord know the secrets of the ash field. He didn't plan to go through the shield or break it altogether, which might alert whoever placed the energy shield in the first place. Michael flew around the dome with Sarba's help. As he was hovering around, he saw more demon caskets on the ground. The soldiers tirelessly unearthed them to God knows for what reason. But what lies in the ground avoided both Michael and Sarba's senses. Bai Ning and her soldiers had no idea what they were doing. As a matter of fact, only one being alive knew the origin of the ancient beast Andor. This ancient beast was a large piece in his elaborate plan to exact revenge on the Dark Lord. "Is that why you summoned me, using the Stone of Hikar?" asked Fokrux as Andor sighed. The Stone of Hikar was a powerful artifact used to summon a god from the mortal realm. Before the Dark Lord locked the mortal realm and prevented Andor from ascending to the god realm, contacting gods was as easy as snapping his fingers to Andor. As the god of time and space, Andor didn't have any need for artifacts to contact the gods in the god realm. Instead, he would just open up a portal and meet them in person. But now, Andor had to use the Stone of Hikar to summon Fokrux. Unfortunately, he had to wait another 100 years to use the Stone of Hikar again. Andor hoped summoning Fokrux was worth using the stone. If anyone could help him with the object he found, it was Fokrux. Andor could see Fokrux's eyes glistening with excitement. "You are right to sense the death aura. Look what I found," Andor said, rising from his throne. Then he climbed down the stairs as the mirror followed him behind. Andor reached the object and pulled down the cloth covering the object. After the cloth fell down, Fokrux saw a colossal head of a hydra. The mirror had to fly back to capture the entire head. Even after 5,000 years, the silver scales still glistened in the light. "That's the Dark Lord's hydra," Fokrux stuttered. He was completely stunned by the head. 5,000 years ago, the entire realm of gods felt the effects of the battle between Andor and the Dark Lord. Even some of the powerful gods had to leave their dimensions and intervene in the battle, not to save or fight for Andor, but to prevent the realm of gods from getting obliterated by the Dark Lord. The Dark Lord and his pet Hydra terrorized the realm, and almost succeeded in killing a fellow god. Thousands of divine beings lost their lives as collateral damage, and the damage to the realm still had remnants of their battle. No one thought a Hydra could become powerful enough to rival the most powerful gods. And for hundreds of years, everyone thought the Hydra was unstoppable until fate played a cruel trick upon the Dark Lord and the Hydra. Something happened between the two that resulted in them fighting to the death. Only a few gods knew the real reason why they fought each other, and Fokrux was not one of them. The battle between the Hydra and the Dark Lord lasted for 2 long weeks. It was Andor who managed to teleport both of them to a separate dimension before they destroyed the mortal realm entirely. The gods had never witnessed such an intense battle between a god and a beast. At the end of their battle, the Dark Lord slew the Hydra and emerged as the victor. Fokrux was fortunate enough to witness the death of a terrifying existence. He watched the light of life leave the Hydra's eyes, and tears roll out from the Dark Lord's eyes. "Vidora!" Andor raised his voice as he burst into laughter. "The Dark Lord's pet." Andor's words echoed throughout the majestic throne hall. He thought resetting the mortal universe would erase his mistakes, Humph, Andor snickered. On the other hand, Fokrux narrowed his eyes. When it came to the Dark Lord, the entire god realm took a step back and analyzed everything. Every time they thought they outsmarted him, he pulled a surprise on them and made them pay. Hence, Fokrux couldn't be as excited as Andor. "Are you sure whatever you're planning to do with this is a smart move?" asked Fokrux. Andor's laugh faded away as he turned around. "Do you think I am making a mistake?" Andor creased his brows. Fokrux slowly shook his head. I am saying the Dark Lord doesn't make mistakes. How do you know that he didn't know Vidora's body would be spared from the array? Focrux asked Andor. After the Dark Lord used the time array and locked the mortal realm, preventing the gods from entering it, many gods in the pantheon tried to break the array. However, they all failed and gave up. The only way to break the array was from within the mortal realm. In other words, only Andor could break the Dark Lord's array and let the gods enter the mortal realm once again as they were used to. Ha 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 ha. Andor chuckled. If he didn't make any mistakes, why did he use the time array to reset the entire universe? I can agree that he doesn't make little mistakes, but instead, he made a gigantic one, and you are looking at it, said Andor. I am going to wake up to his worst nightmare. The last time they fought, this Hydra almost killed him. This time, I will make sure it doesn't fail. Andor patted the Hydra head. I assume that's where I come in. Andor nodded as Focrux rubbed his clean-shaven chin for a brief moment. What's in it for me? If I want to help you take down the most insane and powerful god, you have to make it worth the risk. After all, we both know how far he would go to take down those who wronged him. Focrux started the negotiation like a sly fox. Being a god didn't mean they all would be benevolent and merciful. Some of the gods made even the worst mortals look like magnanimous beings. There was a reason why the Dark Lord slew some of the gods and willed to wage war against the pantheon itself. He hated most of the gods to the core, and some gods would say he had all the right to hate them after what they did to him. The pantheon still believed some gods helped the Dark Lord achieve the things he did, but they found no traitors among them. Focrux words didn't surprise Andor at all. In fact, he expected the god of necromancy to ask something in return. You get to take the body of whoever falls in the battle. Hydra or the Dark Lord himself. You'll get to play with their bodies. Focrux's eyes sparkled as he almost drooled. But the thought of the Dark Lord surviving the battle and coming after him made his body tremble in fear. But if the Dark Lord survived somehow, he won't know you were involved. I know the drill. It's surprising how the gods have fallen. We used to fear no one. Andor snickered. Lots of things have changed, Andor. The realm of gods isn't what it used to be. You will know if you manage to break the Dark Lord's array, said Focrux. Are you going to help me or not? Andor's voice turned grave and serious. For a few moments, Focrux didn't give Andor any answer. Then he took a deep breath and nodded. I will help you reanimate the Hydra. But you need to find the entire body without missing a part. Also, as you know, I won't be able to use my power from here. So I will instruct you to conduct a ritual that mimics my powers and get what you want. It will take time though. Trust me, I can be very patient. Andor let out a murderous grin and turned his gaze back to the Hydra head. Chapter 844. Leaving the demon's grave in the ash field, Michael watched the Skyhall soldiers dig up more and more caskets from the ground. Unfortunately, Vidora's body eluded his X-ray vision altogether. The body was far too deep in the ground. If Andor hadn't given Skyhall the exact coordinates, they wouldn't have unearthed Vidora's body in a million years. He knew everything that happened to the past Dark Lord, so Andor was able to exploit his mistakes. Having no idea Vidora's adult body was in the ground, Michael patiently watched the Skyhall dig up more caskets. He lingered above the dig site for almost an hour, and all the soldiers did was dig. I don't see a point hanging out here any longer, said Kane. Michael didn't wait for others to agree. Instead, he turned around and flew away from the place. After seeing the mural on top of the mother tree, Michael decided to leave Itanes and the demon's grave. Initially, he planned to spend a few more days helping the Wood Elves, but he changed his plans. He thrilled himself to achieve full speed, leaving a dark lightning streak in the sky. Vidora tightened their tail around Michael's neck as they never experienced such high speed. It took them 2 hours to reach the ash field from the mother tree earlier. However, the return trip only took 45 minutes. When Michael pushed himself to the brink, several tiny lightning bolts appeared and crackled around his body. To Vidora's surprise, Michael didn't go to the tribe, but came to the mother tree. He landed right before the stone pillar, creating a shock wave around the tree. Why are we back here? Asked Sarba. Boom. Michael punched the stone pillar as it exploded into bits and pieces. All it took was one punch for Michael to erase his past self's mistakes. Honestly, Michael didn't think the past Dark Lord had made a mistake by killing Vidora. Although Michael didn't know the reason, he knew how hard it would have been for the past Dark Lord to kill Vidora. But no matter what, he wouldn't let history repeat itself, and he broke the pillar as a gesture of his promise to Vidora. Our past is meant to guide us, not define us. We must not give out past the power to dictate our future. Michael looked at his shoulder where Vidora was looking at the pebbles on the ground and said. They slowly flapped their wings to see Michael in the eyes. He is right, started Sarba. The past Dark Lord left this behind because he wanted us to see it and change our future. That's what I've been trying to tell you both. Cain rolled his eyes. Usually, Cain remained silent until his response was absolutely needed. However, when his siblings tried to grow a hatred toward Ghost, he immediately came out of his shell and tried to talk some sense into them. Sarba and Cain turned their gazes toward Iag. I am not mad at Ghost, idiots. I am just confused why they fought each other to death, said Iag. Whatever the reason might have been, we do not need to dwell on it, said Michael. Can we just stay here for a moment before we go back to the tribe? Sarba looked worried as Michael nodded, and went to the mother's tree's edge. He sat down and put Vidora beside him. The two of them looked at the magical world before them in peace. As they drowned themselves in the beautiful sight, Vidora slowly approached Michael and jumped on his lap. Then, the three heads snuggled against Michael's stomach and tried to embrace him with their small wings. You are family, Ghost. We would never hurt you, and we know you wouldn't too. Iag's eyes became watery as Michael rubbed their back gently. Michael was about to open his mouth when he saw the silhouette of the past Dark Lord in the sky. It only lasted in the sky for a mere moment, and Michael could swear he saw the past Dark Lord smile at them before disappearing. At that moment, Michael felt something changing inside him, like something heavy had been lifted off of him. The more Michael learned about the past Dark Lord, the more he understood why he decided to reset the entire universe. At first, it felt a bit extreme to Michael, but he sympathized with him after learning about the dark parts of his life. If he had lost Gaia and been forced to kill Vidora for some reason, he would reset the universe too. He wouldn't let that happen no matter what. The two of them spent almost an hour on the mother tree before returning to the tribe. As usual, the wood elves greeted him with bright smiles and cooked meat since Taskin, and the others could hunt efficiently using the crossbows. I hope you had a pleasant journey, my lord, Karat said as Michael sat on his throne. For a few moments, Michael didn't answer Karat. My lord, Karat called Michael again. He looked drowned in his own thoughts to Karat. What did you say? Michael asked, snapping back to reality. Is everything all right, my lord? Asked Karat. Thilv couldn't help overhearing Karat, and approached the two of them while Taskin was helping the other crossbow bearers perfect their aims. It will be soon, said Michael. Then, with a flick of his wrist, Michael took out the copper ring and the silver coin he snatched from the panther. Like a magnet pulling the iron closer, the copper ring pulled the silver coin almost instantly. Ding! The silver coin hit the copper coin. Michael felt the copper ring frantically vibrate as the silver coin radiated a dim glow. Soon, the silver coin glowed as bright as a torch, making the wood elves around Michael close their eyes. Suddenly, the light shot straight above Michael and opened up a vortex in the air. Michael was surprised to see the coin open up a portal in a blink of an eye. He thought he would have to ask the system or do some work to activate the copper ring. But on the contrary, the copper ring opened up a portal using the coin. How the coin was able to open up a portal was still a mystery to Michael, but he was glad it did. Seeing the weird swirling hole in the air, the wood elves gasped. When the Dark Lord first appeared in their world, Karat saw a portal just like this portal before. In fact, Karat saw the Dark Lord fly through this portal. Hence, his heart sank when he saw another one appear above them. The old man knew their god was about to leave their world. Michael took a step forward and placed his hand on Karat's shoulder. I am not abandoning you all. I will be back soon. But my lord, can't you stay with us a bit longer? Thilv panicked as Taskin dropped what he was doing and came to stand beside his wife. My lord, is there something we can do to change your mind? Asked Taskin, only to see Michael shake his head. There is something I must do in my world. As I promised before, I will build a portal connecting this world to mine. I can't do that from here. The wood elves looked gloomy, and some even cried. However, they knew they couldn't change Michael's decision even though they wanted to. Can we come with you, my lord? Taskin stunned everyone with his question. As much as I like for all of you to come into my world, I cannot take anyone with me at this moment. Michael slowly shook his head. He stepped back and raised his head to see the swirling vortex. As his feet ascended from the floor, the wood elves dropped to their knees one by one. Many, including children, sobbed to see the Dark Lord leave their world. Please come back soon, my lord, Kirat's voice stuttered. He was on the verge of crying out loud. Lady Iag, don't forget what you promised us. One of the elven girls purred as Iag nodded with a smile. I want. And you people better be safe and sound when we come back. Otherwise, you will have hell to pay, Sarba shouted as tears rolled out his eyes. But they were not tears of sadness. On the contrary, Sarba was happy that they would be able to visit their world soon. Granted, both Fedora and Michael wanted to spend more time in Itanes as there was so much more to explore in the world, yet they had no choice. To Michael, his journey through the demon's grave and Itnois seemed cut short by an invisible force. Nonetheless, it was his choice to leave and build a portal back into the castle. Now that he had gathered everything he wanted from Itanes, the Dark Army's financial problem would soon be history. On the bright side, Michael couldn't wait to see Gaia and Nightmare and tell them everything that had transpired. When Michael was just a few inches away from the vortex, Michael took out a modified earpiece and mirror from the system storage. He had to convert all the 10 million gold coins into badass points to modify them. It was worth the price though. The earpiece and the tablet-sized mirror floated toward Kirat. You can use them to contact me if there is an emergency. Michael emphasized the word emergency because he knew the wood elves would call him every day otherwise. We will meet you soon. These were Michael's words to them before he disappeared into the vortex. Meanwhile, Andor felt the vortex open in Itanes using the artifact he gave the Beastmen tribe a long time ago. The coin Michael used to create the vortex was made by none other than the god of time and space himself. So naturally, Andor felt it when Michael used the coin. Andor creased his dark brows sitting on the throne. So one of those idiots managed to lose one to my nemesis. Andor clenched his fist. This act of foolishness alone was enough for Andor to wipe out the Beastmen kingdom. Luckily for them, he had more pressing matters on hand, like reanimating Vedora's body slash. Chapter 845 Fourth Armor Piece. I don't care what the fuck you do, but I want him found yesterday. You understand? I am this close to murdering all the guardians I can find. Gaia stomped the ground. She stood in the surveillance room in the dark forest and contacted all the subordinates at the same time. Except Saber and Adelia. If he is in the southern continent, I will find him, said Tiberius. My girls are doing everything they can, my lady. Sadie started, only to get interjected by Gaia. It's not enough. I want meet Ghost empty-handed. That fucker Noah destroyed both the prototype and the weapon. Even the blueprints are gone. So the only way to turn this into a win is to find the man behind this weapon. Gaia was not playing around. If the subordinates were to meet her in person, there would be casualties in the castle. She was pissed at everyone, including herself. Thanks to Noah and his team, she lost the prototype, weapon and the man who built it. Like a cherry on top of a failure cake, Noah captured the orcs who survived the auction, including the leader, and brought them somewhere Gaia couldn't find. Even Lord Information didn't know anything about the orcs except they supposedly worked for the Beast King. What about the Guardian you flipped recently? If I heard you right, he is in Noah's elite unit. So how in the hell he has no idea about the inverter's location? Gaia creased her brows. Everyone went silent, expecting Sadie's answer. By turning a Guardian into their spy, Sadie outperformed everyone in the room. Even the Dark Queen praised her, which wouldn't happen so often. Through their new spy, they learned the locations of the Guardian safe houses, and how Noah operated in each kingdom. However, even Noah's elites didn't know where he kept Hammond. He has no idea, my lady. It seems like Noah doesn't trust his own people enough to disclose the location. We might have a chance if we track down the Han Torum dwarves, Sadie suggested. Do you think I don't know that? The vamps are searching for them as we speak. But those bearded dodo ducks are good at hiding. After Noah's little fiasco, they went dark. If they were good at something besides building, it's hiding. The subordinates nodded in agreement. After a few more minutes of roasting all the subordinates, Gaia dismissed them. When they were ordered to leave, they all heaved a sigh of relief. To them, the Dark Queen was more terrifying than the Dark Lord himself when she was angry. They could reason with the Dark Lord, who always remains calm and collected. But in stark contrast, no one could utter a word when the Dark Queen was pissed. At that time, the only way to survive her wrath was to keep their mouths shut and agree to everything she said. My lady, Azazel appeared beside Gaia after the mirrors went dark. What does he want? Asked Gaia without turning around to look Azazel in the eyes. Her full focus was on how to find the man who was responsible for building those weapons. Lord Saber says he has an update on the 4th armor piece. As soon as Gaia heard these words, she immediately turned her head toward Azazel. Finally, some fucking good news. Put him through. Soon, Saber's face appeared in the mirror as though all the mirrors had emerged together to form a gigantic face. Judging by the ocean around Saber, Gaia could tell he was on a ship. She also noticed Shorty running around, so she guessed he was in Big Bertha. My lady, Saber slightly bowed. Tell me what you found about the armor piece? Gaia didn't ask any useless questions like how are you or how is the journey. Instead, she went straight to the point. It's in the southern continent, my lady. To be precise, it's in Myril. The man I interrogated told me his family helped bring in 2 crates of ancient artifacts to the southern continent. Apparently, the one who hired him found these artifacts buried somewhere in the Azer continent, said Saber. What makes you think these artifacts are the Dark Lord's armor? Gay rubbed her chin in doubt. Nothing Saber said had actually pointed her to think these artifacts belonged to the Dark Lord. This man's ancestor who brought these artifacts to the southern continent has left behind a ship manifest. In that list he has written unknown metal pieces that attract lightning. His exact words were metal parts that attract crimson red lightning bolts. Gaia raised her brows as she realized why Saber had come to the conclusion that he did. However, she still had another question to ask. This man you interrogated, how did you find him? Asked Gaia. There was no chance for Saber to stumble upon a man who knew about the Dark Lord's armor piece. The past Dark Lord went to lengths to hide these pieces, and ensured only Michael could find them. Granted, one of the armor pieces was found in ruin by others and almost auctioned out to a war god, but it was just a 1 in a million occurrence. She doubted another one of the pieces might have been found by a human, because he tried to sell this in the Aqua Palace. Saber slowly raised a broken piece of metal with a skull engraved. That is. Gaia's voice trailed off as her jaw dropped slightly. That skull in the metal piece was, without a doubt, the symbol of the Dark Lord. There was no doubt in her mind. If that wasn't enough, tiny bolts of crimson red lightning danced around the metal piece in Saber's hand. One of my people was lucky to intercept the sale and inform me, said Saber. It seems awfully legit to me. What about you, Azazel? Gaia asked the demon butler. He focused his gaze on the metal piece. We certainly cannot neglect the possibility that this piece belongs to the Dark Lord's armor piece. Gaia nodded. Have you learned where these artifacts are in the southern continent? Saber took a long deep breath before answering Gaia. About that, my lady. I have good and bad news. Start with good news. I've been getting more and more bad news lately, Gaia sighed. She thought it'd be too easy for them to get the armor piece without going through some kind of trial. It was like the Dark Lord anticipated everything and designed the trials for them. They had found 3 armor pieces so far, and each of them came at a price. Well, the good news is I've tracked down who owns these artifacts, the Salinators, one of the powerful families in Kingdom Myril. Then what is the bad news? I assume it has something to do with why you can't go there and retrieve the armor pieces by any means necessary, said Gaia as Saber nodded. The heir of Salinators, Matilia Salinator, is married to General Quintus. As soon as Gaia heard the name Quintus, a light bulb lit inside her head. In all the chaos, she forgot about Quintus and Kingdom Myril's aggressive expansion. Thanks to Kane's surprisingly masterful tactics, they were able to stop Myril from waging wars on other kingdoms. Moreover, Quintus went dark after Michael killed Fabia Viridis. They hadn't seen Quintus since she turned him into a super soldier using vampire strains. Without General Quintus, the kingdom Myril completely ceased all its hostile activities. After Giselle and Maven merged together, they became a powerful kingdom itself, while Tiberius found his own kingdom, the Freedom Land, although he hadn't announced his land as a new kingdom yet. That left Pririd and the Trident of the southern continent Kivin, Zoril, and Netis aka the kingdoms ruled by kings instead of senates. The last time Gaia heard from Caius, Kingdom Myril, and Kingdom Pririd was in peace talks. For some reason, Kane wanted the peace talks between them to drag on instead of coming to a solution. If he had thought, he could have ordered Arya to assassinate the senators of Myril and bring an end to the Cold War. Yet he chose not to. I did some digging and found when Quintus married Matilia, the Salinator family gifted Quintus with priceless valuables and artifacts. And you think these artifacts include the Dark Lord's armor piece? Gaia tilted her head. Yes, Saber frowned. Judging by the dark lines on his forehead, Gaia guessed they couldn't simply go to Quintus' home and take the armor piece by force. Tell me what the problem is, asked Gaia. Matilia is a regular customer to a noble bathhouse where one of Sadie's girls is working. To the rest of Myril, Quintus has taken personal time, but according to his wife, he disappeared along with many of the family artifacts. I broke into their home and went through all their wealth but found no armor piece. Which means Quintus has the armor piece, Gaia finished Saber's sentence. Are you sure, Saber? Gaia asked. This is the only lead we have, my lady. I'd say we should chase it down. Gaia took a few long moments to think about this. By destroying the prototype and the weapon right under her nose, Noah caused a huge blow to her mindset. She started to second-guess everything she had planned, which was very unlikely of her. It didn't only affect her but also everyone in the Dark Army. Go ahead, but if you sense something is amiss, get out of there immediately. We cannot deny the possibility this might be an elaborate trap designed by that son of a bitch, Noah. Don't worry about me, my lady. I lived long enough to outsmart a human. Saber snickered as Gaia slowly shook her head. Do not underestimate Noah. I underestimated him, and as a result, I have failed the Dark Lord. Saber was actually surprised to see the graveness in her voice. To be honest, he had never seen her like this. I will take your advice to my heart, my lady. Now with your permission, I'd like to dismiss myself. Talk to Tiberius. He was tracking down Quintus, and he might have an idea about Quintus' location, said Gaia. Chapter 846. Back on the bed with Gaia, the storm was raging around the floating mountain in the dark ocean. As the storm grew more violent and powerful, the wind blew past strong enough to pick up a man and fling him to the briny waves. Several tornadoes formed in the sea and slowly moved toward the mountain. The superiorly thick smoky clouds rolled in like boulders, ready to crush anything in their way above the dark castle. The darkness was engulfing and seemed to consume any speck of light entirely. Any last hope was gone. The merciless winds caused the enormous waves to rise like giant sea monsters. These waves almost touched the very bottom of the floating mountain. Every wave erupted like a raging volcano. The lightning storm joined the party and decorated the sky with streaks of lightning. Except for the vampire guards who were tasked to patrol the floating mountain, everyone else took shelter inside the castle. While the storm was raging outside, Gaia sat beside the window and watched the storm outside. She tightly held a cup of hot coffee Raylene had made her. Without Nightmare and Michael, she felt lonely. For some reason, Nightmare chose to fly through the tornadoes to hone his flying skills. But she knew he just came up with an excuse to spend some time alone. It wouldn't take a genius to tell Nightmare missed Claire and the Sunrise sect. He didn't miss them much when Vidora was there to keep him company. Since Vidora left for the demon's grave with Michael, they both felt lonely. She didn't blink as she stared at the storm through the foggy window. Her fingers moved toward the window without her control, writing the name Michael on the glass. Soon, the words disappeared in the fog as she leaned on the window. Like a bird flying out of its nest, her thoughts flew away from the room. The temperature within the hot coffee dropped by several degrees, and started to turn cold coffee. Ever since she lost the prototype and the weapon after so much preparation and planning, she lost her appetite. During the last couple of days, Raylene became another mother to Gaia. She made sure Gaia's been eating and drinking well despite her lack of appetite. When Gaia refused to eat, Rayle would just knock on her head like an angry mother, and feed her with her hands as she did to Cindy and Rummy. Looking at the dancing tornadoes, Gaia's consciousness drifted away as her eyes slowly closed. When her head fell, she became wary and emptied the warm coffee in a single gulp. Then, she strolled toward the neatly made bed, and just collapsed on the bed like a lifeless body. Both her body and mind were exhausted to the point that as soon as she hit the bed, she entered into a dreamless sleep. The rain droplets played drums upon hitting the windows and the roof, playing a lullaby like a loving mother. As she was on the verge of completely losing sentience, she felt a hand around her waist. Gaia thought it was a dream as the embrace felt like it came from Michael. He used to hug her tight while sleeping. Every fiber in her body wanted the warmth to last longer, and did not want this dream to end. Then the hand around her waist tightened its hold, pulling her closer toward a gentle warmth. It felt too real to be a dream. She abruptly opened her eyes as her body was about to jolt out of bed. But her body froze the moment she saw Michael's face. Michael gently brushed the strand of hair falling on her face. On the other hand, Gaia looked as though his shocking return petrified her. She was speechless. "Is this real?" Gaia muttered. "You tell me," Michael said, slowly moving his head closer to hers. She could feel his warm breath breezing past her like a morning breeze. When she opened her mouth, he closed it with his own lips. Their bodies pressed together heatedly against each other, breathing heavily as they tasted each other's lips. Everything around Gaia blurred and silenced. The only sound she heard was the sound of his hands gently cupping her face to position her face for a heavenly kiss. They only departed when they lost their breath. "When did you come back?" asked Gaia. Her alluring eyes sparkled with joy at seeing Michael. It was too much of a shock to her. "Just a few minutes ago. The moment I stepped into this world, I came running to see the most beautiful girl in the entire universe." Michael pinched Gaia's nose playfully. "I see the demon's grave has turned you cheesy," Gaia purred. She threw her arm around Michael's shoulder and tried to pull him closer, although there was no space between them. "Where is Vidora?" Gaia asked. "They went to see Raylene. I think we should talk about why I sensed some gloom in your eyes. Something happened?" Despite how happy she looked, Michael could see through her eyes and read her like a book. After entering the portal, he appeared somewhere in the crystal ocean that divides Elon and Azair. From there, he used runic teleportation to reach the castle, so he didn't know what had happened while he was gone. As she heard him, she moved closer and rested her head on his chest. "I fucked up," Gaia said in a husky voice. Then, Gaia began to tell Michael what had happened since he left for the demon's grave. When she finally finished her story, Michael surprised her with a chuckle. "You idiot. That was the reason why you look so gloomy?" Michael rubbed her head as she looked at him with shock and surprise. To be honest, she never expected Michael to take her failure so casually, like it didn't matter. "I failed you," Gaia purred. Once again, Michael ruffled her head. He liked to ruffle her perfectly combed hair and kiss the top of her head. Although he was not the most romantic man in the world, he never passed on an opportunity to pamper her and shower her with kisses. "Nothing you ever do will fail or disappoint me, you silly idiot. What if Noah destroyed the prototype and the weapon? You did everything you could." But, Gaia muttered as Michael shook his head. "No buts. Listen." Michael lifted up Gaia and put her body on him. He then cupped her face and looked her in the eyes. "If I fail to do something, would you be disappointed in me?" Gaia shook her head. "Of course, I will kill you if you don't marry me or look at another girl. But I won't feel disappointed." Gaia punched Michael in the chest. Despite her words, he never doubted Michael, not even for a second. She trusted him enough to leave Michael with thousands of beauties in a room without a worry in the world. The trust they had in each other was stronger than anything in the world. They both knew a relationship couldn't survive without trust. Her words made Michael chuckle. "See, that's how I feel. Whatever you do or don't, you will never disappoint me." Besides, why are you looking at the events as failures? You and I both know it was Noah who destroyed the weapon along with the Hontorum shipyard. We can use it to turn the dwarves against the guardians. They pretended to be elves, so I'd say the elves won't be happy about their names being dragged through the mud. So we can give the elves and the dwarves a common enemy, said Michael. He came up with the plan on the spot, and as simple as it may sound, the plan would bring major heat upon the Guardian Guild once he provided proof about Noah's involvement to both dwarves and the elves. Now that Gaia said they turned a guardian into their spy, it would be relatively easier for him to gather the needed proof to make Noah's life harder. Noah may have gained the upper hand in the new weapon matter, but Michael would soon pay him back several folds. I've returned from the most dangerous places in the world. Can you put aside these matters and give me some love? Michael winked. Only kisses for you, my darling, said Gaia in a playful tone. Until you marry me. Why did I agree to that? I have the most beautiful sexy girl as my fiancée, and I don't get to do more. Michael pretended to be disappointed. As far as Michael was concerned, relationships were more than having physical satisfaction. He didn't think Gaia would say no if he insisted, but Michael respected her wish not to have anything physical more than a kiss. He was quite happy with that because she was the one for him. This was a magical relationship Michael would treasure forever. Every time he looked into her eyes, he promised himself not to let anything happen to her. The Dark Lord was right to reset the entire universe. If something were to happen to Gaia, Michael would go to hell or heaven to bring her back, no matter the cost. Even the Dark Lord has to obey his woman, Michael, Gaia chuckled. Inside these walls I am the boss. Is that so? Michael grabbed her by her slender waist, pushed her to the side, and got on top of her. He held her wrists firmly. Bastard, don't even think about it, Gaia squirmed. I am not thinking about anything, Michael said with a foxy smile. The following hours were spent cuddling and kissing. They talked for hours until they both fell asleep under the cozy blanket. Chapter 847 Selisi, the Queen of Nagaland. A few days ago, in a spacious hall with a ceiling 20 feet high, designs of fruit and flowers were carved into the molding, and small, fat children with wings looked down at the marble floor from every angle. Vases of blossoms gave off a cloying scent that made my eyes itch. The hall had a square oak table in the center with numerous comfy chairs to sit in. Since there were no windows, sun rays could peek into the room. Instead, a magnificent chandelier hung above the oak table, brightening the hall with its golden light. The dark brown walls made of wood perfectly complemented the marble floor, though one would think the combination wouldn't work. The only way to get in or out of the hall was the steel door with countless runes engraved in it. Seconds became minutes, and minutes turned an hour when the door finally creaked open. Zanali stepped into the hall and strolled toward the table. They'll be here soon, Mother. Zanali pulled out a chair and said, looking at the door. Then a tall, graceful woman dressed in majestic red robes. Her hourglass figure sat well on her wafer-thin body. She had a complexion of an impeccable golden hue. Her pencil-thin eyebrows eased down gently to her black, beetle's leg eyelashes. A sculptor could not have better fashioned her seraph's ears and pixie's nose. Filed to perfection, her rose-red fingernails ran through her fiery red hair. Spools of it plunged around her photogenic face and hid a swan's neck, elegant and smooth. This woman was born to draw attention toward her, and it was hard not to look and give her full attention. When she opened her mouth to answer Zanali, her beguiling oyster-white teeth lit up the room. She was the ruler of Nagaland and Zanla's mother, Selisi Hearthill. Even after marrying the king of Nagaland, she kept her last name without changing it as any woman would have. Once Selisi settled down, people began to enter the hall one by one through the door. At first some elves arrived, then some dwarves, orcs and humans. At last, a group of orcs with books the size of a newborn baby entered the hall and took their seats before the table. After the Nagas filled the rest of the empty seats, Selisi finally rose from her chair to address the 60 or so people in the hall. They all stopped muttering amongst themselves and turned their gazes toward her. Victoria and Evan sat with the humans in the crowd, holding hands under the table. First of all, I thank all of you for answering the summons and coming here, said Celici in her captivating voice that fits for a ruler. "We are gathered here to make an important step in history to protect our world from all the evil there is and will be." Celici started her speech in a calm manner. "The great 8 clans used to protect the world and us. But the reason you've all here is that you and I both feel the same. They failed us. They forgot the very reason why they were created in the first place. Corruption has rooted in them to the core. If we want our future generations to thrive and prosper, we as their elders have to come together and do what must be done." Celici paused and looked at her audience. "We must be the shield that protects our world from evil and darkness." Celici slightly raised her voice. "We must be the light bringers in the shadow." Her words echoed through the hall. "We must fight for the future of this world for our children." Everyone had a tiny spark in their eyes after hearing her thundering words. Each of them in the hall was handpicked by Celici herself. The most important thing Celici looked at in them was their patriotism and the thirst to protect the world. If one was to dig more about each individual, they could find that these people either witnessed the Dark Lord's wrath in person, or were kicked out of their clan for doing what the others deemed a violation of clan rule. But if they hadn't violated the rule, many would have died or failed to get the justice they deserved. For instance, Evan left the Guardian Guild after witnessing Ghost obliterate the entire Ithilien Island, and the Barnes family what he witnessed that day and how weak he felt affected him mentally. For almost a year, Evan fought the traumatic experience and took the path to self-destruction. At one point, he wanted to kill himself so he could stop hearing all the cries for help. As a godsend, he had Victoria and Zanali. Evan would have been inside a casket 6 feet deep if it weren't for them. After finally stabilizing his mental health, Evan decided to stop running from his fear and fight it head-on. And his fear was just a man, the Dark Lord. So when Zanali told him about Sales's plan to fight the Dark Lord, he agreed without a second question. Just like Evan, every single one in the hall had a story. Some were affected by the Dark Lord's actions in one way or another, while some had a strong moral sense to fight evil and protect the world. Since all the Great 8 clans made sure the biggest evil in the world was the Dark Lord, they naturally felt inclined to fight the Dark Lord. Instead of giving a long speech about who I intend to fight, hopefully with your support, I will show you what he was capable of and what he will do to us if we do not fight. Celici flicked her wrist as a cube materialized on the table's center. A dim light shot out of the cube and formed the image of an island. The images changed from uniquely built buildings to people laughing with their children on the streets. Those who realized where these images were taken clenched their fist and prepared them mentally. Almost everyone knew what was about to happen except for the orcs, who lived most of their lives in seclusion. Then, as they guessed, the beautiful island became a battlefield. The people saw everything they admired burning as dead bodies littered the ground. One by one, the images showed how brutal the last couple of days were for Ithilien. Thousands of mothers lost their sons and daughters. Thousands of children lost their fathers and became orphans, and thousands lost everything they had and had to beg for refuge in the nearby kingdoms, said Celici as the images continued to vex their minds. Only one man was responsible for all of the death and destruction, the Dark Lord. As soon as Salesy uttered the name, the entire hall went silent. But unlike most of the population, the people in the hall seemed furious rather than afraid of Michael. Some of those who lost their loved ones in Michael's war against Ithilien clenched their fists to the point their nails sank into their skin and started to bleed. As we all know, the great clans did nothing to bring him to justice. They are busy doing their politics and fixing their public image. That's one of the many reasons why I want to form a defense against the Dark Lord in the shadows. Because to fight evil such as him, we need to get our hands dirty, said Celici as Zanali sighed inside. A year ago, if her mother proposed to build another order in secret to fight against the Dark Lord, she would have outright rejected it or tried to talk her mother out of it. But after witnessing all the death and destruction caused by the Dark Lord firsthand, Zanali learned the hard way that her moral views do not apply to him. Evan slowly raised his hand. Evan, right? Celici turned her gaze toward Evan. He nodded and continued with his question. Let me get this straight. Are you telling us that we have to find a new clan, or an order outside the Great 8 clans? Asked Evan. Our new order doesn't need to be separate from the Great Eight clans. As you may have noticed, some of you are in one of these clans. You don't have to leave your clan to fight, just like I don't have to leave my throne. What matters is we are in this together, and we must focus on one thing, putting an end to the Dark Lord's reign before it begins. In other words, you want us to be double agents? Victoria's question followed Sales's explanation. I don't want you to be anything. You are allowed to leave if you want to. I am prepared to put my life on the line to ensure my children and the future generation get to live in a world without any fear of the Dark Lord and his evil aura. The question is, will you do the same? Salisi asked Victoria. I am. It wasn't Victoria who answered the question but Evan. I can't talk for the others, but I had enough of Ghost and his cruel reign of terror. I watched him slaughter thousands of soldiers for what? Revenge? No. Evan shook his head. He wanted to quench his thirst for blood. There was a time I said to myself, he is not that bad. Evan shrugged. Yes, he was not bad. He was evil. I saw the look on his face when he slaughtered Maxim Barnes, his wife and his daughter. He enjoyed their pain and suffering. To this day, there are people who still suffer because of him. I, for one, will not stand aside and let him continue to terrorize the world I want my children to grow up in. So yes, I will put my life on the line and fight him to death. Evan banged the table as Salisi smiled, looking at the people around Evan who agreed with him. Despite their racial differences, everyone in the hall decided to form a vanguard against the Dark Lord. 5,000 years ago, what started as a mere group of 70 members grew into a shadow clan that rivaled the Great Eight clans. Like it or not, history had a tendency to repeat itself. Chapter 848. Not one but two. Andreas. After initiating her own order against the Dark Lord, Salisi returned to her room. Her husband, Castian Ashton, was visiting one of their cities to oversee the relief program. The city was affected by famine, and the entire Nagaland depended on the charity of the Empress. Salesis was a spacious oval room with walls the color of a burning flame. The smell of sweet gardenia candles engulfed the room. On the right side of the room was a royal red sofa set for Salisi to sit and relax, looking at the bamboo garden through the window. Although she was supposed to stay and sleep with Castian in the king's room, she chose to be in her own room. This place had become her refuge and safe haven throughout her almost 2 decades of marriage. Her bedroom only held the things that were very precious to her. She let no one inside the room, including her husband and the maids. As a matter of fact, she cleaned her room by herself instead of ordering the maids to. She decorated the walls with several portraits that reminded her of her life as the Queen of Nagaland. Almost no one knew about Salesis' life before she became the queen. Some believed she was a noble family heir, while others believed she seduced Castian after Queen Adelia's untimely death. But Salisi couldn't care less about the speculations or those who opposed her because they were still loyal to Adelia and her murdering maniac of a daughter, Gaia Ashton. Adelia closed the door behind her and walked to the window to see the serenity of the bamboo garden outside. She could connect with her inner thoughts while she was in her room. Her mind established a sense of peace as she stared at the peaceful garden outside. Whenever her life in Nagaland got tougher, which happened so often because of Gaia and Adelia's loyalists, she would come to her room and think things out thoroughly in order to make life easier. The sound of the bamboo fountain canceled out the sounds of everything around her. As she looked at the bamboo garden, a puff of smoke came from one of the portraits depicting a village. The smoke slowly took the shape of a middle-aged man with milk-white hair. The man hovered in the air behind her, waiting for Salisi to turn around. She made him wait for a few minutes and then turned around. "Has everything gone according to our plan?" asked the man. "It went better than we expected. You know how to pick them, Andreas." Salisi addressed the man as Andreas, the Supreme Guardian. She was not wrong, as the man before her was indeed Andreas. Just like the soul inside Noah's ring, the man before Salisi was another part of Andreas' whole soul. The only difference was the soul part in Salesis' room was much younger compared to the soul piece inside Noah's ring. "Except my disciples," Andreas sighed. "You didn't choose Noah Winston, Andreas. He was born a god, just like the Dark Lord. You chose Noah because you wanted to train Noah in the fight against the Dark Lord, said Selisi. It seems like my other soul part is doing a bang-up job training Noah. I wouldn't be here if he wasn't, Andreas sighed. Although both Andreas derived from the same soul, they became separate beings. Besides, the Andreas with Noah was in existence longer than this Andreas. As a result, Mentor Andreas lost some memories, including the other soul pieces in existence. Don't underestimate Noah Andreas. The Dark Lord tried to get him pickle when he said the Supreme Guardian was alive and with Noah. Everyone thought it's going to put a target on his back. But he played the situation well, and turned him into a ladder to reach the Supreme Guardian position. And from what I've been hearing, he was handling everything well. Sales's praise surprised Andreas. He was with her for 2 decades, and he had never heard Selisi praise her own daughter once, let alone someone else. He just needs a little push, and that's why we are here. Aren't we? Selisi asked as Andreas nodded. Salii strolled toward the sofa with Andreas hovering beside her like a friend. He was the only one who knew the real Selisi, and she was the only person who knew of his existence. They had been collaborating for almost 2 decades. 20 years ago, Selisi and Andreas orchestrated Adelia's death to usurp the throne of Nagaland. Adelia's family, the Wraiths, was building a powerful kingdom to support the Dark Lord when he arrived in this world. They almost succeeded in their plan because before Selisi took the throne, Nagaland was powerful enough to take on the Elven Empire itself. Gaia blamed Selisi for the downfall of Nagaland, and she was right to do so. To be precise, Gaia was half right. Sales's rule was indeed the reason for Nagaland's downfall, but what Gaia didn't know was that Selisi planned everything. Sales's sole reason for being the queen of Nagaland was to keep Nagaland in check, because the last thing the world needed was a superpower to back the Dark Lord in his war against the world. So far, Sales's plan was going without a hiccup. Her next move was to build a shadow order to fight the Dark Lord in ways the Guardian Guild would never dare. She built an image of a kind and compassionate queen for this very moment. Everything she sacrificed and went through was finally coming together. I think he needs more than just a little push. I think we need Noah to see that the longer he ignores the Dark Lord, the more people will suffer. Power comes with responsibility. Noah needs to learn that one way or another. Andreas' voice was grave. Fortunately, he lacked a physical body and was restricted from leaving Sales's side. Otherwise, Noah would have had 2 mentors to argue with. Noah thought his current mentor was pushing him hard toward fighting the Dark Lord, but he didn't know how bad it could have been if this Andreas had been inside Noah's ring instead. Destruction is easier than creation, Andreas. You cannot blame the guy too much. He's clearly doing his best. Why are you defending him so much, I wonder? Because you aren't. Like it or not, only Noah could kill the Dark Lord. So we should help Noah instead of criticizing him, Andreas sighed, nodding. You are right. I just hope he stops wasting time and cuts down the Dark Lord's army. We have put our plans in motion, Andreas. We will start dismantling the Dark Lord's empire piece by piece, starting from the kingdoms in the southern continent. An hour ago, the gathering went more successful than Selisi and Zanali expected. It was really surprising for them to see how many people were boiling with rage inside toward the Dark Lord. They all needed an outlet and a leader who directed this anger and utilized them against the Dark Army. When Selisi slowly filled in the void they desperately hoped to be filled, they were all easily swayed to join the order. While Selisi was addressing everyone's concerns, Zanali left the room for a moment and brought back a whiteboard with several portraits stuck to it. Many of those portraits were hand-drawn and resembled Michael. Surprisingly, some of them highlighted the Olympus around Michael's wrist. The people in the hall turned their gazes at the whiteboard and the portraits. They silently expected Selisi to explain what the hell those portraits were except the ones that had Michael's face. While most of their eyes were glued to the whiteboard, Selisi flicked her wrist as a brass spyglass finished with various intricate runes appeared on the table before her. If one looked closely at the spyglass, they could see a tiny H embossed among the runes. The H was really, but it was there, symbolizing the creator of this spyglass. To defeat the Dark Lord, we need to know both his strengths and weaknesses. Until recently, I thought he didn't have a chip in his armor. But this little thing changed my thoughts by exposing a crucial weakness. Salisi paused for a moment, letting everyone boil with curiosity. Everyone leaned forward. Then Salisi slowly gave them an answer. The Dark Lord is not as strong as we thought while he was in the southern continent. Everyone was visibly shocked to hear Salisi, because her words contradicted what they believed. As the world knew, no one could use cultivation power within the void line. Hence, the moment someone entered the southern continent, they would become mortals. Even the immortals were not an exception. That was the reason the southern continent looked like a new world to the cultivators, and why they avoided the place. Moreover, that was why Michael chose the southern continent as his home base, because in a world where no one could use energy, one who could would be the god. This spyglass was built to gauge someone's cultivation level when the void effect hit the continent of Elon and Azair. But it could determine someone's cultivation even when they were inside the void. No one bothered to look for someone's cultivation in the southern continent, because there was no point in that until the Dark Lord started to use arch energy within the void line. Salisi placed the spyglass back on the table and continued. Although he uses energy, the moment he stepped into the void line, his cultivation went from immortal to core formation. Salisi slowly turned around and placed her hand on the portrait of Olympus. This thing around his wrist is what gives him the ability to use cultivation within the void line. If we take this out, he'll be as weak as a commoner. How certain are you of this? Asked Victoria. I'd bet my life on it. Each of you will get one when we wrap this up. So if you don't believe me, you are welcome to take this and monitor the Dark Lord from one of our safe houses. Chapter 849 Money Problem. Michael took a long nap on his comfy bed with Gaia under the storm's lullaby. Even after the storm had disappeared, the sky was still dark and gloomy, leaving only clusters of drizzling gray clouds. The Dark Army and everyone in the castle didn't know the Dark Lord had returned from the demon's grave, so it was just another day for them. When Michael finally opened his eyes, he saw Gaia curled up under the warm blanket attached to him like a koala bear. He slowly pulled away her hands and left the bed while trying his best not to wake her up. As usual, Michael entered the bathroom attached to his bedroom and took a long bath. Although he kept his body clean using arch energy, he was accustomed to taking baths. Then he wore a new set of round-neck full-sleeve shirt, long coat, trousers and boots. Of course, everything was in black as he liked. After a long time, Michael had two swords on his back, forming the shape X. Standing before the 6-foot mirror, Michael combed his hair, rolled his sleeves to his elbows, and left the room. Good morning, Gaia purred as she slowly woke up from her sleep. She rubbed her eyes and stretched her arms above her head. Michael stood there as Gaia came to him, pecked him on the cheek, and went inside the bathroom to take a bath. He waited for her outside. While waiting for her, Michael took out an empty parchment and a quill. His world table was located before the table because of Michael's habit of gazing at the horizon. He placed the parchment on the table and sat on the chair. What do I need? Michael rubbed his head through the hair with the quill and listed everything he needed to brew his special brew in his mind. One by one, Michael wrote everything on the parchment. Except for the herbs that were only found in Itanes, Michael needed a cauldron big enough to hold 1,000 liters of liquid. Fortunately, the dwarves had finished building a new alchemy hall for Michael to start his work. The next thing he required was the bottles to hold the brew. Certainly he couldn't hold the brew in vials. Instead he needed glass bottles. When it came to glass bottles, the only place to get them from was Dalgarum. Once he got all the required items, he could finish the brew in a day or two. As he finished writing his list, Gaia exited the bathroom, smelling like a newly blossomed jasmine. Once again, she kissed him on the cheek and unsheathed his swords without noticing the parchment in his hand. The sword almost slipped out of her hand, but she managed to grab it by the hilt with both her hands in time. Bloody hell! It's heavy, Gaia gasped. She had to use a bit of her strength to lift the sword back into the air and swing. Careful, Michael warned Gaia. Now that you can forge weapons, why don't we visit this magic forge of yours and forge something for me? Asked Gaia while swinging around the dark sword. Do you have something in mind? Michael asked Gaia. Yesterday when Gaia told him everything that happened, she seemed particularly intrigued by the Death Kiss crossbows, which reminded Michael of handguns. With his inventor and blacksmith traits, he planned to fuse energy and his knowledge of modern weapons to create new kinds of weapons. Equipping Big Bertha with torpedoes was the first step in that plan. Maybe, Gaia nodded. Michael finished his list and put it inside his coat pocket. Then he stood up from the chair. Let me guess, you want something like the Death Kiss crossbows? Looking at the glowing smile on her face, Michael could tell he had guessed it right. She then came to him with the dark sword on her shoulder. Can you make me one? I can make one better, Michael casually shrugged. Given the right materials, Michael would forge better weapons. Unfortunately, most of the weapons in his mind required special runes that could only be bought from the system. So he had to postpone forging new weapons until he could settle the debt. Besides, a portal was required to reach his forge, and he was nowhere close to building one. He wasn't an expert in portals, but he knew it would cost him millions which he didn't have. They were in dire need of gold coins. Hopefully Michael could get his new revenue stream up and running. Otherwise, they would be in big trouble because although the Dark Army was loyal to him, loyalty wouldn't fill their bellies and keep their needs in check. But you have to wait for some time. First, we need to fix the financial side of things. Gaia rolled her eyes, giving him an it's about time look. Connect me with the twins. I want them to get me some things, said Michael. He then took the dark sword from her hand and unsheathed it. Following Michael, Gaia contacted Azazel and conveyed Michael's order. The corridors and the walls looked much better than when he left the castle a few weeks ago. He had yet to see the building process and hoped to get more coins before the dwarves stopped the construction works. Not because they needed gold coins as their wage, but because they needed materials and materials that didn't come for free. Even the Dark Lord had to buy things using gold coins. There were several rooms on the way to the meeting hall, which were blocked by crates and stones. The dwarves were yet to finish building those rooms, according to Gaia's exact prerequisites. She oversaw everything and gave the dwarves the challenge of their life. Although the Dark Army kidnapped these dwarves had grown to love the challenge of building the Dark Castle. It was nothing like they had ever built. Every single dwarf was handpicked by Gaia as she settled down for nothing but the best. On top of the talented dwarves, Eladir worked with a group of runemasters to engrave defensive and offensive runes throughout the castle. The past Dark Lord's castle and the arrays alone killed thousands of guardians and enemies who dared to step onto the dark ocean. At its peak, the castle was nothing but a death trap feared by everyone in the world. If the past Dark Lord was alive, he would be proud of his current self because the castle Michael was building was shaping up to be more powerful than its earlier version. The meeting hall was dimly lit with torches instead of chandeliers. The flickering light illuminated by the torches added an eeriness to the hall. When Michael and Gaia reached the meeting hall, they saw Azazel was waiting for them. My lord. Azazel bowed deeply. His gaze immediately fell on the dark swords as he could feel the threatening aura radiating from the swords. Azazel then proceeded to pull out Michael's and Gaia's thrones for them to sit on. After they settled into their respective thrones, Azazel waved his hand as the stone table slowly split opened in the middle. A mirror rose from the hole and flickered for a moment before showing the faces of Titus and Optimus. The twins looked different with their cropped haircuts and brightened faces. Keeping them off the battleground was the best decision Gaia made for them. She had her doubts when she made them the procurer of rare goods and everything for the Dark Army for the best price possible. However, the twins surprised Gaia by making contact throughout Elon and Azair, and dealing with the merchants themselves. It wouldn't be an understatement to say the Dark Castle solely depended on the twins for the construction materials. My lord. My lady. The twins bowed as their eyes glistened with gratefulness and respect. I'd love to have a chit-chat with you guys, but I am kinda in a rush. So let me cut to the chase. I need everything on this list as soon as possible. Michael took out a parchment and raised it so the twins could take a good look at the things he had written on the yellow parchment. Titus quickly scribbled everything down on a piece of paper. Thanks to their experience, Titus and Optimus were able to give Michael a rough estimate of how much everything on the list would cost him. My lord, if we are to get everything you want, it's gonna cost at least 50 million. Gaia's brows arched up as she snatched the parchment from Michael's hand and read everything from top to bottom. What in the hell would cost 50 million? She muttered. But when she saw the epic class cauldron, the largest size, Titus' words made sense to her. Why stop for epic? Just write down you need legendary class, Gaia said sarcastically. Titus and Optimus scratched their heads, looking at the Dark Queen bicker with the Dark Lord himself. She was the only person in the entire army who had the guts to yell at him. Believe it or not, this was one of the many reasons the subordinates trusted the Dark Lord more than the Great Eight clans, because an evil person, as they claimed, would never sit there and listen to a woman yell at him. On the contrary, they knew only one with a kind heart and humanity intact would respect and listen to his female counterpart. Whatever. Just get him what he needs. I assume you two need some time to locate everything on the list, Gaia asked as the twins nodded. Give us 5 days, my lord, asked Optimus. We need time to get the coins for the items. Gaia leaned closer to Michael and whispered into his ears. Michael nodded. Getting the coins they needed was Gaia's specialty, and she had done a better job than he ever could have. Hence, Michael trusted Gaia to deal with it as she always did. She already started to rub her chin, formulating a plan inside her head. If the twins were right, they needed 50 million in 5 days. Then I expect you to report to me in 5 days, said Michael. Chapter 850 Opportunity arises. Michael was about to leave the meeting hall after talking to the twins when Azazel received a call from Sadie. My lord, Lady Sadie has learned something important, Azazel said. Put her through then. Michael motioned him to connect Sadie to the mirror before them. Azazel nodded and flicked his wrist as the mirror flickered for a moment before showing Sadie's face. Sadie was pleasantly surprised to see Michael without his mask or the usual black armor. His current attire reminded Sadie of the time she first met him. At that time, she was far stronger than him. Everything felt like a dream to Sadie. In such a short time, the cocky guy she met at the Heavenly Gate competition went from Foundation Stage Warrior to the Dark Lord, who was at the Immortal Stage. Looking at Michael's charming face, her cherry-red lips curled upwards, radiating a bright smile. My lord. Sadie grabbed her long sky-blue skirt and curtsied Michael. How are you, Sadie? Michael asked with a gentle smile. I am perfectly fine, my lord. Thank you for asking. Michael nodded. Sorry to break the reunion, but tell us, what have you learned? Gaia interjected. It was not like Gaia was jealous or something, but she didn't like wasting time when they had to earn 50 million in 5 days. Time was of the essence. Princess Chanel Forbes was cursed by an elven mage, my lord. Sadie took a deep breath and said. Her words stunned Michael for a moment. The name Forbes rang a bell inside his head. If he was right, the king of Kethin, Noah's homeland, was called Porter Forbes. Princess of Kethin? Gaia asked as Sadie nodded. When Gaia was the princess of Nagaland, she met Chanel at a gala, and exchanged a few words. Of course, Gaia paid little to no attention to Chanel, or any other nobles. She hated those galas and always found an excuse to escape midway. Go on, tell us everything you know. Gaia gestured at Sadie to continue. The gears inside her head slowly started to turn, formulating a plan to get the 50 million gold coins, and maybe more. This felt like a God-sent opportunity to Gaia. She knew about Michael's curse-breaking skill. Thus, if Chanel was indeed cursed, she had a way to break the curse and save the day for King Porter. King Porter's close friend is a regular customer of one of the dance houses in Rosegate. I have some of my girls working there since it's where the nobles tend to let their tongues loose. A few hours ago, this man had a little too much ale and spurted out that the elves had cursed the princess. Recently, Princess Chanel canceled all her visits and completely went dark. I heard rumors from the maids that they were ordered not to disturb the princess no matter what. Sade paused for a moment and continued. I had my doubts for a while because I felt something was amiss, especially after Hendrix Gardner paid the king an unofficial visit. So I ordered my girls to work on the ministers. Hendrix Gardner, Michael muttered to himself. The last time Michael met this 6-star alchemist in the alchemy competition, the vampires almost killed him. He would have died if Michael wasn't there. At that time, Michael only wanted Gabriel to die. Michael wondered what the old man thought when he realized the young man sat beside him and judged the competition was the Dark Lord himself. Apparently, the princess has only 3 more days to live. What about Noah and the Guardians? If the princess only had 3 more days to live, King Porter would have approached Noah and asked for his help, right? After all, Noah is still a citizen of Kethen, said Gaia. Plus, she is a princess. I wouldn't be surprised if she were in love with Noah, Michael chuckled. The last time I heard from our guy in the guild, Noah and his team were planning to venture into the treacherous ocean to find a way to break the curse. Then we have to beat them to the princess and save her instead. Gaia leaned back on her throne. Considering Noah took the weapon and the prototype out of her hands, it was only fair that she returned the favor to him by curing the princess before he could. For a price, Gaia snickered. Unlike Noah, Michael didn't need to go to the treacherous ocean to break the curse. Michael could break the curse in a few minutes if he wished, thanks to his curse breaker skill. On the other hand, Michael laughed inside, thinking Noah would come out of the treacherous ocean empty-handed because he had taken the curse-breaking artifact long ago. So unless there was another similar artifact in the treacherous ocean that even the system didn't know of, Noah would stumble upon nothing but sticks and stones. Did you learn anything about why the elves cursed the princess? How she ended up getting cursed by the elves? Gaia frowned in doubt. The continent Elon had the lowest number of elves in the entire world. Many people in Elon would die without seeing an elf in their entire lives because the elves tended to live in Ar and avoided Elon because they thought Elon continent was a backwater place and beneath their standards. Besides, the elves wouldn't go around cursing people without a valid reason. If they chose to curse her instead of killing her, Gaia knew there must be a reason behind it. According to the man, it's the usual cliché, my lady. Long story short, Princess Chanel met an elf when she was visiting Kingdom Thera and fell in love. She wanted to marry him against King Porter's wishes. She tried to run away with the elf, except the king caught them both and ordered his men to beat the crap out of the elf. The next day, the elf's uncle personally paid King Porter a visit and gifted Chanel an evil curse as a reminder of the king's mistake of raising his hand against his kind. Michael chuckled as it reminded him of Claire's story. She laughed at Chanel inside for thinking she could be with the elf and live happily ever after. If anything, Chanel was lucky the elves didn't curse all her family. But when Michael thought about it, the elf chose Chanel over her family because he wanted her family to suffer more. Imagine seeing your only daughter dying slowly and painfully while you stand there and do nothing. The elf wanted King Porter to feel helpless and blame himself for the rest of his life. That does sound like what an elf would do, said Michael. It seems all the princesses are rebels. Michael turned his gaze toward Gaia and winked. Instead of giving Michael a snarky comment, Gaia just rolled her eyes. Then Gaia turned her gaze back to Sadie. This is indeed good news. You've been doing a marvelous job so far, Sadie. Gaia couldn't help praising Sadie. Everyone, including Michael, knew how hard it was to impress the princess of Nagaland, but Sadie managed to do just that. In a short amount of time, Sadie turned a guardian into their spy, inserted her girls in almost every part of the world, created a web of spy networks, assisted other subordinates with their tasks, and slowly solidated her place as the next sect leader of the Silver Moon. It was no simple task, especially when she had to work under Noah's growing influence. It's my pleasure to serve you, my lady. Sadie bowed her head and opened her mouth for a moment before closing it. She looked as though she wanted to say something but didn't know how to. Both Michael and Gaia noticed Sadie's change in behavior. Is there something else you want to share, Sadie? Michael asked her. Sadie looked at Michael and Sadie for a few moments before taking a deep breath. Yesterday, I had a meeting with a guardian. She attended the tea party arranged by Alvaro's aunt, one of the elders in Silvermoon. The questions she asked me and the way she looked at me just left me with a bad feeling, said Sadie with a worried tone. Alvaro is our inside man, right? Michael asked Sadie to see her nodding. Lord Saber warned us about her visit. So I was prepared. Still. Sadie's words trailed off. Should I put a hit on her through Arya? Gaia asked, but Michael shook his head before Sadie could give her answer to Gaia. For now, act like nothing happened, Michael said to Sadie, turning his head to look at Azazel. Tell Trista to send one of her minions to shadow the guardian who met Sadie. My lord, Sadie interrupted Michael as he turned his gaze back to Sadie. She is going to the treacherous ocean with Noah, Sadie muttered. Michael rubbed his stubble beard for a moment, until he found a way to deal with this annoyance. It was obvious to Michael that this girl was trying to impress Noah, but Michael didn't know how much the girl knew about Sadie and why she took an interest in her. Since Sadie was far too valuable to risk, Michael had to find a way to keep Sadie out of the Guardian Guild's crosshair. As long as Noah was with her, Michael knew he wouldn't be able to take her out. Besides, if he did, Noah would automatically realize Sadie had something to do with the Dark Lord. Therefore, Michael's only viable option was to follow this girl until he knew more about everything. Then, when she comes out, tell Trista to shadow the girl. I want to know everything about her. If push comes to shove, I will deal with her personally. Michael's voice turned grave. After becoming the Dark Lord, Michael was rarely involved in problems like this. Instead, he had subordinates to solve them for him. But this felt like something he had to deal with it personally. After hearing Michael's words, Sadie heaved a sigh of relief. With the Dark Lord's reassurance, Sadie could rest easy. The last thing Sadie wanted was a guardian to snoop around. After all, she was just a few months away from getting crowned as the next sect leader. Chapter 851 Breaking the Curse for a Price. Princess Chanel's room was nothing like a typical princess room. Contrary to bright colors, Chanel used dark colors to decorate her room. The walls looked gloomy, with dark brown paint and a lack of light through the royal red curtains covering the windows. Chanel decorated the room with numerous things she had collected through visits to other kingdoms. Her room was a chaotic mess, but it had a certain rhythm. On the corner, she put a sofa set facing the fireplace. Several book racks filled with texts, scrolls, and artifacts were a few meters away from the fireplace. Next to these book racks, she had a wide closet containing all her dresses, and at last, her bed was located between a study table and a 6-feet-tall bonsai tree. The tree had grown out of shape and looked as though no one had pruned it for weeks. The lack of light made leaves look a little paler than their usual jade green. In the dark room, a couple of people gathered around the bed where Princess Chanel was groaning in pain. The princess was a charming beauty with striking blonde hair inherited from her mother and hazel eyes from her father. Her smooth, silky skin lost its glow due to the curse, and the princess herself looked thin and weak. Even her collarbones and cheekbones became visible to others, because she hadn't eaten for weeks. The curse affected her very soul, and as a result, her body couldn't sustain itself using arch energy. Princess Chanel squirmed and kicked her legs in excruciating pain. She closed her eyes and clenched the royal red bedsheets under her as tight as she could. Princess Chanel's mother, Queen Clarice, gently brushed the hair flowing onto Chanel's face and sobbed. Tears rolled out of the queen's red eyes sitting atop dark circles. The queen held Chanel's hands and sat beside her while the others looked at the princess in pain helplessly. Your Majesty, an old man wearing golden robes embroidered with silver threads raised his voice, cutting through the silence in the room. King Porter Forbes was not in his kingly robes, but wore a plain shirt and brown trousers. He looked more like a commoner than a king with his messy dark hair, and untrimmed beard with patches of white hair. Porter Forbes sat at the end of Chanel's bed with his hands folded. His hazel eyes glimmered with helplessness and grief. He was desperate for help. Even the 6-star alchemist Hendrix Gardner couldn't do anything to lift the curse. All he could do was ease Chanel's pain and make her life easier until her body and soul gave up. The sight of his daughter groaning in pain was eating him from within. It's time we break this news to the citizens, said the old man, one of the most loyal people who worked for Porter Forbes. Everyone in the room shared the same pain as King Porter and Queen Clarice because they saw Chanel grow up to be a young lady from a baby. They loved the princess like she was their own. Unlike the royal courts, everyone loved Porter Forbes. He was a kind and benevolent king. The old man's voice stuttered as he couldn't say what he really wanted to. Everyone who checked Chanel had told them one thing: the curse cannot be lifted. Some even said the king and queen should make peace and say goodbye to Chanel. King Porter's last resort was the guardians, but even though Noah was a god, he lacked the powers to perform the miracle of lifting the curse. How can I? The king muttered. Arg! Suddenly, Chanel began to scream and frantically wriggled on the bed. Queen Clarice quickly wrapped her slender arm around Chanel's waist and stopped her daughter from rolling out of bed. Meanwhile, Porter grabbed Chanel's legs and tried to lessen her squirming. Princess Chanel's scream echoed through the room, making everyone shudder. The way she screamed and shouted really made them want to leave the room as soon as possible. They weren't strong enough to stay there and see the princess in agony. Princess Chanel continued to suffer for almost an hour. By the time she stopped screaming, her body had no strength left to move. Except for the muffled groans, no words or sounds came out of Chanel's mouth. Porter's heart told him to have hope and expect Noah to return with a cure, while his mind told him to accept the inevitable. He was unfortunate enough to know how powerful elven curses are. One of the elven runmasters who examined Chanel's soul told him that no one could lift the curse, including the one who put the curse in the first place. The curse was unliftable and shouldn't have been used on a human, according to the elf. So nothing would happen even if the Empress herself ordered the elf who put the curse to lift it. Porter's eyes became watery as he slowly turned around to address everyone in the room. Please leave us alone for a moment. Porter's voice broke off. Take all the time you need, Your Majesty. We will take care of everything else, said the old man before leaving the room with the others. After everyone left the room, Porter finally let go of the tears in his eyes. His legs refused to take a step forward. He moved like a snail, reached his wife's side and collapsed on the bed. Chanel was their only daughter, and the memories they had with Chanel flashed before their eyes. Is this the end, Porter? Queen Clarice broke into tears. Words barely escape her mouth. Porter couldn't even give Clarice a few comforting words, because he knew there was no way of helping Chanel. If there was a chance of remotely lifting the curse, Noah would have given them hope. Even he told Porter to strengthen his heart and mind and prepare for anything. Why do the gods want this for us? What did we do wrong? If there was a god, he wouldn't have let this happen to our daughter, Porter said, gritting his teeth. The helplessness he felt turned into anger, and when Clarice talked about the gods, Porter snapped. But little did they know that when they needed a god, the one who arrived to help was the devil. The curtains slowly swayed to the wind as Porter and Clarice felt a cold breeze. Everyone around them darkened as the dim light orbs flickered. At first, they thought the wind caused the orbs to flicker. But then everything grew darker to the point Porter and Clarice couldn't see what was before them. The room turned pitch black. A few seconds later, the orbs flickered back to life, giving them just enough light to illuminate a third figure in the room. Porter's pupils shrunk as he saw someone sitting on the other side of Chanel's bed. Porter's warrior instincts kicked in as he quickly rose from the bed. He instinctively reached for the sword and grabbed the side of his waist where he used to have his sword. Queen Clarice's motherly instinct made her pull Chanel close to her. A calm voice resonated through the room when Porter was about to shout out for the guards. You wouldn't make a sound if you want your daughter to live. The words made Porter's heart skip a beat and prevented him from making a sound. As much as Porter wanted the guards to come running into the room, he wanted to know if there was some truth to the intruder's words. Show yourself, Porter ordered the intruder. A candle slowly flew past him and hovered beside the intruder. Then the intruder lit the candle with a snap of his fingers. To Porter's shock, the candlelight illuminated the face that terrified everyone, the Dark Lord. Porter's heart almost stopped when he saw the Dark Lord's eyes that glowed like bloodstones. Dark Lord. Queen Clarice trembled from head to toe. Her fear of the Dark Lord paralyzed Clarice's body. As Porter was searching for words, the Dark Lord rested his head on his fist and sat on the throne with his leg atop the other. The king and queen had no idea how he managed to enter the castle without raising any alarms. If he wanted them dead, there was nothing to stop them. However, his glowing eyes didn't contain any killing intent within. Where there is pain, let there be darkness. Porter and Clarice heard the Dark Lord's bone-chilling voice. Their minds were in too much shock to process his words. I am the only God who listened to your pain and came here to help. Tell me, Porter, will you save your daughter or deny my help and let your daughter die in pain? The Dark Lord's words sounded slow and deep. Each word struck them like an arrow. If this was any other situation, Porter would have called out the guards and fought the Dark Lord himself despite the obvious results. Still, Porter was a God-fearing man who would rather die fighting evil than serve one to live. However, he couldn't bring himself to refuse the Dark Lord's help when his daughter's life depended on his words. "You have 5 seconds to decide. Your daughter's life is in your hands now," said the Dark Lord. He didn't give them much time to think about anything except Chanel's life. This was the small light of hope they had in days. Everything and everyone failed them, and in 3 days, their daughter would die in pain. Any parent at this time would give anyone anything to save their child, and Porter and Clarice were no different. 1. The Dark Lord raised a finger. 2. He raised another finger and continued to count. "Save her." Porter answered him when the Dark Lord reached count 4. 200 million and your teleportation portal. That would be the price for your daughter's life. Porter wasn't surprised because he expected to pay the price when the man before him was the Dark Lord. However, Porter and Clarice felt glad that the price for saving their daughter was gold coins, and the portal instead of their souls, or anything that would forever bind them to the Dark Lord. "You can take whatever you want as long as you lift this curse from my daughter." Porter rushed the Dark Lord when Chanel's groans got louder. They shuddered when the Dark Lord rose from his throne and stepped toward their daughter. Part of them wanted to keep Chanel away from the Dark Lord's reach, but they stood still like statues, looking at the Dark Lord placing his hand on Chanel's head. As soon as the Dark Lord touched Chanel, her body trembled. A glow appeared in Chanel's chest as Porter and Clarice watched the glow getting brighter and brighter, until they heard something snap. After they heard a sound like a twig break, the Dark Lord took his hand away from Chanel and stepped back. "Father." Porter heard the word he thought he would never hear again. Under his watery gaze, Chanel slowly opened her eyes. Chapter 852 Portal to the Forge. King Porter Forbes and Queen Clarice spent the entire day with Chanel, who was miraculously cured by someone. The ministers were speechless to see Chanel walking out of her room fully healed. The king and queen went with the story that the curse suddenly disappeared from Chanel's soul. As much as the monsters and the nobles doubted Porter's words, they had no other explanation. The possibility of the Dark Lord entering the castle and lifting the curse had never come across their minds. That day, King Porter ordered the servants to prepare a lavish feast, celebrating Chanel's recovery. The evening sun cast long shadows upon Kingdom Kethern. As the slanting rays of the setting sun gave a warm orange tinge to the horizon, the darkness slowly shrouded the rest of the world. Soon Rosegate was aglow with bright city lights, and the castle stood atop the Jill like a fully decorated Christmas tree. When everyone in the castle returned to their rooms to cultivate and sleep, King Porter and Queen Clarice sat on the edge of their beds, holding each other's hands. They looked exhausted and nervous. Their eyes frantically moved around the room, as though they were searching for someone. "Where is he?" Queen Clarice muttered. "He said he would meet us here at midnight," King Porter said. Since Chanel was cured, his eyes looked lively and filled with life. Unlike when he was in Chanel's room, Porter looked like a proper king now, with his hair neatly combed and embroidered royal red robes. Despite the concerns in their hearts, they remained silent, waiting for the Dark Lord. Silence swept across the room, and a wolf's howl in the distance kept them company. Eventually, the light orbs in the room started to flicker just like the orbs in Chanel's room when the Dark Lord arrived. Suddenly, the light radiating from the orbs got snuffed out as darkness completely took over the room. Their hearts shuddered and prepared to meet the Dark Lord. In a blink of an eye, the orbs lit up again. Although King Porter and Queen Clarice expected the Dark Lord to arrive, they still felt a bolt of shock running down their spines when they saw him sitting on a throne made of skulls and bones before them. Their bodies jolted up from the bed as if the bed was on fire. "How is the princess?" Michael asked King Porter and Queen Clarice. They were surprised to hear the humanity in his voice, unlike before. "She is doing good," King Porter answered. "Under any other circumstances, I would have lifted the curse for no payment. But even I have some obligations. As a ruler, I think you would understand," said Michael. They lived long enough to apprehend whether someone was speaking from their heart, or just tallying through the teeth. Hence, his words actually surprised both the queen and king because they sounded genuine. "Please take this." King Porter slowly removed the space ring from his finger and extended it toward the Dark Lord. The ring ascended into the air, floating toward him. Michael quickly took a look inside the space ring and saw stacks of gold coins. The system scanned the space ring and confirmed the amount inside, 200 million. "I ordered my men to leave the portal room as you said," said King Porter. After seeing Chanel laugh once again when he thought they had lost her, King Porter didn't regret making a deal with the Dark Lord at all. Deep down, they felt grateful to the Dark Lord because if it wasn't for him, Chanel would never have been cured. It was he who answered their prayers. So no matter what the world said about him, to them, he was a man who saved their daughter. Besides, he just asked for 200 million and a portal which was practically nothing to a king. The only problem was King Porter had to deal with the generals and the ministers about the sudden disappearance of the portal. He just hoped the Guardians or Noah wouldn't become suspicious of his dealing with the Dark Lord. Eladir and his minions were dismantling the portal and teleporting the parts as they were speaking. Instead of building a new portal that would cost 300 million, Eladir suggested Michael get an existing one. Then, he could modify the portal to connect the castle to the forge using the copper ring left behind by the past Dark Lord. Luckily for Michael, King Porter had recently built a teleportation portal with the help of Ice Fair Duke. "Just remember one thing, King Porter, every coin has two sides. Do not believe everything you hear," said the Dark Lord, rising from his throne. He strolled to the wind with his hands stuffed in his pants pockets. "What should we do if the elf wants to harm Chanel again?" asked Queen Clarice. Since the Dark Lord was kind enough to lift the curse, she hoped he would discreetly do something about the elves. But what she really wanted was for the elf who cursed Chanel to die, because as long as the elf was alive, Chanel's life would always be in danger. As a mother and a queen, she had to protect Chanel, even if that meant striking another deal with the Dark Lord. "You should ask this to Noah. He will deal with the elves. As much as I'd like to rip apart the elf who cursed the princess, it's better for Noah to deal with them instead of me, because the less I involve in your lives, the better," said Michael. Dealing with the elves was not a big matter to Michael. In fact, he had multiple ways of dealing with them. Option number 1, he could put a hit on the elf with Arya. Option number 2, he could ask the Empress herself to keep the elves in check. But instead of choosing the first two options, Michael went with option number 3, let Noah deal with the elves, which would undoubtedly lead to Noah pissing off the elves. As a result, Noah would become an enemy of the elves, and the more enemies he had, the better for Michael. Down the road, Michael could even team up with the elves in the battle against Noah. "They say I am evil, but I never tortured a girl before her parents' eyes and intended them to see their daughter slowly die," Michael shrugged. "Anyways, if I were you, I'd keep Chanel out of R and seek the Guardian Guild's help. Elves are vengeful creatures. You should be more careful dealing with them in the future." With a flick of his wrist, Michael took out a card with the skull embossed in the center. He put the card on the table beside him and turned his gaze back to King Porter and Queen Clarice. "Keep this hidden if you want to contact me again. But if you don't feel like it, throw it away," said Michael. Michael was about to use the runic teleportation to leave the castle when King Porter stepped forward. "Dark Lord." Porter called out to Michael. "Thank you." When Michael turned around, King Porter lowered his head. "We are grateful for what you did for our daughter," Queen Clarice slowly said. "You are good people. You don't deserve such punishment." As he said, Michael willed the system to teleport him back to the Dark Castle, leaving Queen Clarice and King Porter behind. After he left, the throne vanished into thin air as King Porter and Queen Clarice exhaled heavily. Back in the castle, Eladir was running back and forth inside an empty hall that was still reeked of fresh wood and marble. Grand chandeliers lit the room brightly and illuminated the giant circular portal in the center of the room. The portal's outer structure was made of pure silver, and the dwarves built the steps with marble. At that moment, Eladir was busy carving runes on the silver ring while the copper ring Michael gave him was lying on the floor. "You are back." Eladir noticed Michael entering the room and stopped what he was doing. Seeing the proud elf bow toward him despite his busy work was surprising to Michael. When Michael approached the portal, he noticed the runes dimly glowing and pulsating energy. "So everything went well?" asked Michael. "The portal hall was empty, as you told us. I assume King of Kethern won't become a problem for us in the future?" asked Eladir as Michael motioned him to continue his work. "I don't think so. You know, the Queen asked me if I could help them with the elf situation." Michael talked to Eladir while the elf was carving runes on the portal. "What did you tell her?" "They all hate and loathe you until they need your help, huh?" Eladir snickered. "I said let Noah deal with the elves. It's his job as the Supreme Guardian to keep his people safe. Besides, I have a feeling Noah would piss off the elves and make an enemy out of them like he always does." Michael chuckled. "As long as Andreas is with him, we cannot predict Noah's behavior. The Andreas I know is a rebel and a man with an iron will. If he sets his mind to do something, he will do it no matter what. Suppose he wasn't there 3,000 years ago. We could have destroyed the Great Eight clans in a few weeks. That bastard ruined everything." Eladir snarled. "I wasn't there 3,000 years ago, was I? I would like to see him try that again." Michael cracked his fingers. "After we finish the portal, we should go to the forge and complete our new weapon for Big Bertha," said Michael. "I looked into the design and came up with the necessary runes. But those runes require a huge amount of energy. At one point, you have to come up with an alternative for arch-energy crystals. One problem at a time, Eladir. We still haven't mined a quarter of the crystals in the mountain," said Michael. As far as Michael was concerned, Mugashukis energy radiation would continue to form crystals in the Stormville mountain, and that Hydra wasn't going anywhere soon. So Michael didn't need to worry about the arch-energy crystals running out. Chapter 853 Forging the Torpedoes. Eladir and Michael spent an entire day working together to finish the portal. They lost track of time and ignored everything that happened outside the hall. Gaia often entered the hall to bring Michael and Eladir something to eat and drink. Other than that, Michael received no visitors. Rather, Gaia took care of everything. "Now, if you put a crystal in there." Eladir pointed at a tubular-shaped golden pipe next to the portal. The metal tube ran into the ground and connected at the portal's bottom under the steps. It was Michael's task to build an intricate mechanism that turned arch-energy crystals into pure energy that could be used to activate the portal. No one needed the mechanism outside the southern continent since the atmosphere itself contained pure arch-energy, and the runes could harness this energy. Considering the southern continent's atmosphere had no arch-energy, Michael had to build such a device. In other words, without Michael, no one could build a portal inside the void line, no matter how many rune masters tried. Michael retrieved a big chunk of crystal, dropped it into the pipe, and waited for the portal to absorb the energy. The metal pipe vibrated, letting out a purr. White smoke slowly escaped the metal pipe as Michael sensed an intense heat radiating from the pipe. "It's working," Eladir said when he noticed the runes began to glow on the metal ring around the open space where the vortex was supposed to appear. These intricate symbols began to glow brighter and brighter, until Michael felt the space around him distort. It was like an invisible magnet pulling him closer. With a suppressed boom, a crimson-red vortex appeared within the ring in a blink of an eye. "Let's bring some creature and send it through the portal first," Eladir said. But he was too late to realize Michael had already dashed into the portal. When Michael entered the vortex, everything went dark for a split second, and then, the scenery around him changed. He appeared right at the entrance to his forge. The forge looked the same as when he had left it a few days before. Before he stepped into the forge, he turned around to see if the vortex was still there. Surprisingly, there was no swirling vortex behind him. Instead, all he could see was a glowing rune on the wall. Michael instinctively placed his hand on the rune that resembled a swirl. The moment he touched the rune, the wall trembled. Then, the wall slowly split open, forming an archway. Inside the archway, Michael saw the crimson-red vortex. Michael strolled toward the portal, and entered it once again to reach Eladir. "That was dangerous," Eladir snarled when Michael stepped out of the portal. "We are the best at what we do. So I didn't have to worry," Michael shrugged. Besides, the system would have warned him if the portal led to somewhere else than the forge. Follow me. The forge awaits, said Michael. Eladir followed Michael into the portal and stepped into the demon's grave for the first time in his life. The forge welcomed Eladir with its scorching heat. Eladir didn't even spend a few seconds in the forge as he began to sweat bullets. As soon as Michael entered the forge, he removed his long coat and the full-sleeve shirt he wore beneath. Why is it so hot here? The heat he felt was nothing like he had ever felt. It was like someone put him inside a boiling cauldron. On top of that, the furnace wasn't even burning. Michael chuckled, seeing Eladir getting drenched in his own sweat. We are inside a volcanic mountain. Take a look at this. Michael walked to the furnace and pulled the lever as the golden lava oozed into the furnace through the pipes hanging above. What do you mean a volcano? Asked Eladir. Come with me. Michael walked out of the forge and headed outside to show Eladir where they were. Eladir followed him through a dark narrow corridor until they reached a dead end. What he thought was a dead end turned out to be a door when the Dark Lord placed his hand on the wall. The moment Michael opened the door, an intense scorching heat wave brushed past Eladir, almost burning his hair. Careful, said Michael, shielding Eladir from tripping down the narrow path and falling down right into the bubbling lava. Now Eladir realized what he meant by inside a volcanic mountain. As I said before, I cannot fly in the demon's grave. So to get up there, we need to climb. Michael pointed at the top of the mountain. But if you do not want, we can return to the forge. Michael knew although Eladir was inside the body of a half-elf, he still behaved like a dark elf who was extremely sensitive to dry or hot weather. The last thing Michael wanted was to hear Eladir bitch about climbing the mountain. However, Eladir surprised Michael with his answer. I am not a delicate young flower. Of course, I want to climb. Follow my lead if you can, Dark Lord. Eladir snickered and started to climb the wall like he was an expert mountain climber. I didn't expect that. Michael's brows arched up, looking at the elf crawling up the wall without slowing down. He was not going to lose to an elf in mountain climbing, so Michael started to climb as fast as he could. Eladir was surprisingly fast, but Michael was faster than him. With a few leaps and jumpers, Michael reached the top and extended his arm to help Eladir reach the top. Where did you learn to climb like this? Michael asked Eladir as the elf grabbed Michael's hand and reached the top. When Eladir was about to answer Michael, he saw the vast open world of Demon's Grave. The sight of red skies, thunderstorms, and smoky air stunned Eladir to the core. On top of that, Eladir saw the Colossus bull in the distance, and his jaw dropped. What in the hell is that? Eladir asked, looking at the bull. Something we don't want to mess with, said Michael. Eladir's gaze swept across the vast land. The demon's grave looked more terrifying than he had previously imagined. He felt lucky Skyhall prisoned him in the Ukulun realm. At least he had a beautiful place for sightseeing. Almost half an hour later, Michael and Eladir returned to the forge and started working on their next project, the torpedoes. Eladir stepped outside the forge and into the dark castle to get everything they needed from the storeroom. Then, Eladir returned to the forge to see Michael starting the furnace. When he thought the temperature couldn't go any higher, the furnace surprised Eladir with its scorching heat lava. Michael put the metal ores into a large cauldron and hung it above the lava. Because they weren't dark metal ores bought from the system, the hot lava provided more than enough heat to melt them into hot gooey goodness. While Michael was working near the furnace, Eladir studied the invisible runes around the forge. To others, the runes were invisible, but to him, they glowed as bright as stars in the midnight sky. The more runes he saw, the more he realized the similarity with his own work. To be more precise, they were his work. The runes were almost everywhere. The tables, walls, ceiling, and pipes. Everywhere he turned, he saw runes. This whole forge was a beautiful mix of runes and intricate contraptions, just like the portal. The forge was a symbol of friendship between the Dark Lord and Eladir, the elf who stood by the Dark Lord's side till the last day when he reset the entire universe. As Eladir was studying the runes, Michael grabbed a 5-meter-long and 3-meter-wide metal pillar, created a mold in the shape of a cigar using the dark beams, and poured the melted metal into the mold. Michael let the metal cool down and take the desired shape. While the metal was cooling down, Michael returned to the work table, and started to build the targeting system in which he needed Ellider's help. Enough gawking around. We have work to do, said Michael. Finally, Ellider snapped back to reality and turned around. This whole place has my runes. Not yours, Peresi. They belong to the past you, said Michael. I wonder what else they left behind. Judging by the complexity of each rune, I must have learned quite too much. No shit. We designed an array to reset the entire universe. So yeah, you did learn too much. Michael rolled his eyes. You can admire your work later. Now come here and help me with this, Michael ordered Ellider. Then the two of them continued to build the torpedoes while discussing their past versions. Building torpedoes were two-man's job. First, Michael as a blacksmith had to build the outer shell and fill it with explosive materials. The second task fell on Ellider's shoulder as he had to engrave runes inside and outside to enhance the explosion's power upon contact, as well as to harness the power of arch-energy crystals. It's done. After almost an hour later, Ellider heaved a sigh of relief and motioned Michael to see the torpedo on the table. On the outside, the torpedo looked like nothing more than a 1-meter-long cigar with fins at the end. The outer shell was built with metal and engraved with intricate runes which were barely visible to the naked eye. On contrary to how it looked, the torpedo was heavy as a boulder. Ellider had to use all his strength to roll it around. Upon reaching the table, Michael ran his hand through the torpedo, feeling the surface of his new Deathbringer. If his calculations were right, a single torpedo could obliterate a frigate to pieces, and had a range of 20 kilometers. Now that we finished the hard part, let's move on to the easy part, said Michael. Obviously, he couldn't put these torpedoes into a cannon and fire it at his enemies. Instead, Michael had to build a special gun to use these torpedoes and an aiming mechanism. Thanks to Michael's inventor trait, building them was as easy as crafting a new bow to Michael. Chapter 854 Ghost Ships. The fierce sun beat upon the seemingly never-ending southern continent sea, reflecting the light into a blinding patch of shine. The sea was calm, pulsing, and breathing rhythmically. In the calm sea, a brig sailed with the wind, patrolling the seas. The ship squealed while the sails tightened and leaped forward, away from a tiny island with a couple of coconut trees. The tame lapping of ripples against the hull rang out across the bay, as the sail with a skull painted on rose higher and higher. The glistening reflection blinded Captain Fairbank, casting a dark shadow down the ship's upper deck. Slowly it blended with the calm and sparkly, orange-shaded water. The sail calmly swayed from side to side, and occasionally flapped in the morning's ocean breeze. The stench of salty air gave the crew a kick of boost to tackle the day ahead of them. In the distance, a gust danced and twirled across the water's surface. The ship slowly glided forward through the mirror-like water. The puff ever so slowly crept closer, as if it was the predator, and everything else was the prey. Look alive, men. We have rich fat merchants to milk. Captain Fairbanks roared. The soft breeze streamed through his red hair and oval face with blue eyes. His loose white shirt fluttered in the wind, exposing his hairy chest. Fairbanks and his crew terrorized the sea under Pirate Lord Vance, until the Dark Lord decided to kill Vance and many of his pirate captains for refusing his offer to join him. Fairbanks was one of the lucky ones who were spared by the Dark Lord's wrath. I have a report saying the Phoenix Manor merchants are on their way to Jysel for gem trading. So you men know the drill. We intercept, check their goods and make them pay their taxes. Fairbanks laughed out loud. A year ago, he wouldn't have spoken these words even if someone had put a blade against his throat. He used to pillage merchant ships to the bones and sink them for fun. Most of the pirates lived like this, and as a result, merchant ships rarely ventured into their seas. During their best days, they pillaged 1 or 2 ships every 3 months, and went without pillaging for the rest of the year. Sometimes, 2 pirate groups would fight each other for a crate of rum or less. But everything changed when the Dark Lord conquered the seas and took over the pirates. He struck deals with the merchants and ordered the pirates to stop pillaging them like madmen. Instead of pillaging, the Dark Lord ordered the merchants to pay a percentage to the pirates every time they ventured into the southern continent for trade. Many pirates hated the idea of collecting taxes and not pillaging. But they did as they were told anyway because the pirates knew better than to mess with the Dark Lord. Those who did were brutally murdered and thrown to the sharks in front of the other pirates as a warning sign. Fairbanks was one of those who wanted to avoid ending up being shark food. At first, Fairbanks and his crew were skeptical about the Dark Lord's unconventional order, but the number of merchant ships coming to the southern continent gradually increased. Within 6 months, there were more merchant ships than pirate ships on the seas. As a result, the pirates were able to make more coins as their cut from the tax than they ever did pillaging. The pirates who felt skeptical and hated the Dark Lord for preventing them from pillaging quickly changed their minds about him. Under the Dark Lord, the pirates thrived and lived their golden age. For Fairbanks, this was just another relaxing day at the sea. His task was to intercept the merchant ships and tax them according to the goods they were carrying. After all these times, Fairbanks could do the tasks in his sleep. As he was sailing on the calm sea, his quartermaster, a dark-skinned man with nose piercing, rushed toward Fairbanks. "Captain, we have spotted a ghost ship," the quartermaster said. His dark eyes contained a sliver of fear. Fairbanks had the same fear in his eyes as he heard about ships with no symbols or crest on sails attacking the pirate ships and disappearing. Rumor had it that the Dark Lord's naval army has lost 5 pirate ships to these ghost ships. Fairbanks' hands reached for the spyglass dangling on his waist and looked in the direction the quartermaster was pointing. Through the spyglass, Fairbanks saw a lone ship heading in their direction. There it was, a frigate with no symbols or crest on its gray sails. As soon as Fairbanks spotted the ghost ship, a strange bell echoed through the calm sea. It sounded like a cry mixed with both anger and sadness. "What are your orders, Captain?" asked the quartermaster. Fairbanks lowered his spyglass and turned his gaze back to the quartermaster. "Man the cannons and prepare for a battle," said Fairbanks. His voice was loud enough for the entire crew to hear him. Soon, they all grabbed a spyglass and scanned the horizon. "Ghost ship spotted." At that moment, a pirate manning the crow's nest shouted, pointing at the horizon. Almost everyone on the upper deck heard and saw the ghost ship. It was too late for panic control. "Prepare the cannons," the quartermaster roared as his order swept across the deck. The pirates panicked and stood still like statues for a few moments. They spent too long collecting taxes and enjoying life without battle, so when they were ordered to prepare for battle, their bodies refused to move. It took them a few moments to realize the danger they were in. "We will bring their heads to the Dark Lord," Fairbanks shouted. The moment the crew heard the name of the Dark Lord, they snapped back to reality, because the fear of the ghost ship was nowhere close to the fear they had of the Dark Lord. The crew quickly reached the cannons, and some ran down to the lower decks to convey the battle order to the crew down there. While the crew was preparing for a battle, Fairbanks raised his spyglass to take a look at the ghost ship again. What the? To his complete shock, he saw no ship through the spyglass. He frantically moved the spyglass left and right, trying to locate the ship. Looking at Fairbanks, the quartermaster looked through his own spyglass and was stunned by the sight of an empty horizon. The ghost ship was nowhere to be found. "Do you see the ghost ship?" the quartermaster shouted at the pirate standing atop the crow's nest. But before he could answer the quartermaster, the pirate fell down from the top and splattered all over the deck, painting the floor red. The crew was stunned by what had just happened. In their shocked state, they failed to notice the iron arrow on the floor, covered in the pirate's blood and flesh. Suddenly, out of nowhere, the ghost ship appeared closer to Fairbanks' ship. The crew and the captain were caught off guard. They had no idea where it came from. "Take cover," Fairbanks shouted as every fiber in his body screamed at him to lower his head and duck. He was a veteran and had enough battle experience to guide his crew out of thick situations. However, his battle experience was overwhelmed by the sheer power of the ghost ship. All the 50 cannons on one side of the hull exploded at the same time and bombarded Fairbanks' brig. 9 out of 10 times, a brig had no chance of winning against a frigate. Unfortunately for Fairbanks, his ship was too close to the frigate and unprepared for return fire. Fairbanks ducked down and held the helm as tight as he could. When he slightly raised his head, he saw his quartermaster stumbling around the deck with a large hole in his chest. One of the cannonballs went straight through his chest. Blood oozed out of his mouth, and before the quartermaster could hit the ground, another cannonball took his head clean off. A loud whistling sound kept ringing in his ears, preventing him from thinking straight. Most of the crew were either thrown off the deck or dead by the cannon fire. When the ghost ship was reloading its cannons, Fairbanks stood up and rotated the helm as fast as he could. The ship had taken too much damage. The main sail poles were barely standing, and one or two cannonballs fire away from breaking down. As a captain, it was his task to save the ship and the rest of the crew. He frantically rotated the helm to sail away from the frigate. While trying to escape, Fairbanks looked at the ghost ship and saw the hostile crew. They were all dressed in some kind of silver robes with pointy hats. None of their faces were exposed as they covered themselves from head to toe. "Full sail!" Fairbanks shouted. He knew it was too late for them to return fire. The only hope they had was escaping the frigate before it reloads its cannons. Boom! Out of nowhere, a giant arrow hit the front deck and split open the brig in half. Fairbanks failed even to see where the arrows were coming from. More arrows rained down upon the deck, impaling everyone and everything. With the front half slowly sinking down, there was no chance for Fairbanks to escape the frigate that had almost finished reloading its cannons. "I am not going down without a fight," Fairbanks roared as he unsheathed his cutlass. He ran toward the rope they used to board the hostile ships and tried to swing to the frigate. He could have escaped if he had let go of the rope and jumped into the water. However, he was a pirate through and through. He may have let go of pillaging, but he would never die without putting up a fight. When he was about to land on the deck, he heard another volley of explosions. Suddenly, everything turned dark around him. The last thing he remembered was a sharp pain in his head. Then his whole body felt light. Chapter 855 New Weapon for Big Bertha. Meanwhile, back in the forge, Michael finished forging everything he needed to use the torpedoes and prepared to leave. He put out the fire in the furnace while Eladir put the torpedoes in the space ring. To snuff out the flames, Michael had to pull the lever beside the furnace down. As soon as he pulled it down, a chilling stream of frost fired out of the ancient ice core and put out the flames. "Let's go," Michael said. Eladir nodded and walked toward the portal to leave the forge. After they entered the portal, a strange sensation ran through their bodies. The sudden drop in the temperature affected their bodies and minds. It took Eladir a few moments to feel normal. On the other hand, when they stepped out of the portal, Michael saw Gaia was waiting for them with Azazel. "We have a situation." Gaia creased her brows. She didn't even bother to inquire with them about the portal or the forge. Michael knew something was amiss. "What happened?" Michael asked. "Do you remember the ghost ships that's been attacking our ship in the southern continent?" Gaia asked Michael as he nodded. Corey complained about these ships at the gathering. Apparently, these ships were using hit-and-run tactics with the backup of killing themselves in case someone managed to capture them. Before leaving for the demon's grave, Michael ordered Corey to get to the bottom of it and unwrap the mystery behind those unknown ships. But judging by the look on Gaia's face, he could tell these ships had appeared once again. "They sank one of our ships a few minutes ago," said Gaia. "You should see this, my lord." Azazel handed over the tablet-sized mirror in his hand to Michael. The mirror flickered for a moment before showing Michael a calm, see from the point of view of someone near the rudder. "Captain, we have spotted a ghost ship." Michael saw a dark-skinned man in the mirror. "After a few attacks, Corey asked me for spiders so she could monitor every captain under her command." Gaia explained to Michael why the ship captain was wearing a spider. He totally focused in the mirror, searching for the ghost ship. "Ghost ship spotted." Michael saw the pirate atop the crow's nest pointing at the horizon. Soon, the pirate captain turned his gaze toward the direction the pirate pointed. "Get to the good point," said Gaia and slid her fingers through the mirror as the feed in the mirror played faster. She removed her hands from the mirror when a gray ship sailed beside the pirate captain's ship. The feed was not stable as he was covering down from cover. Still, Michael was able to pause the feed and take a clear look at the hostile ship. This frigate in the mirror had a grayish hull, sails with no crest or emblem, and a crew completely covered from head to toe. If Michael wasn't a blacksmith, he would have missed the complex build of the ship. Although it looked like a typical frigate, the ship was built differently. For example, the hull had tiny holes the size of a fist under every hull cannon. On top of that, the cannons on the upper deck were different from typical cannons. They were built in a rectangular shape instead of a conical shape. I am not going down without a fight. Michael saw the pirate captain standing up and running toward the rope despite the bombardment. He grabbed the rope, swinging toward the ghost ship. The feed distorted in the mirror before everything turned blue. When did this happen exactly? Asked Michael. 5 minutes ago. Big Bertha was sailing nearby, so I ordered them to head to the ambush location, said Gaia. Her eyes glimmered with killing intent, and one could literally feel the cold murderous aura around her. They will pay for what they did, Michael calmly said. He extended his palm toward Eladir as the elf removed the space ring containing the torpedo from his finger and placed it on Michael's palm. Without uttering a word, Gaia stepped closer to him and waited for him to activate the teleportation. Thanks to the runic teleportation, Michael was able to directly reach the Big Bertha in a blink of an eye. Full sails, full sails. Short was running around Big Bertha's upper deck, ordering his crew around. As a quartermaster to the temporary captain of Big Bertha, Corey had quite an authority among the pirates. Shorty didn't earn his position by simply being cute or bootlicking, but through his hard work. Michael and Gaia were impressed when he completely stopped drinking and cultivated diligently for the past year. The Olympus around Shorty's wrist was a symbol of his hard work and a painful reminder to anyone who dares to mess with him. Usually, the Big Bertha would be anchored at Corey's Island and rarely sailed the seas. However, when Corey heard about another attack and the Dark Queen's order, she sailed to where the ambush happened. Since they were alone, Gaia hoped the ghost ships might try to attack Big Bertha. Unlike Fairbank's crew, the Big Bertha crew was trained to be on guard always. Among the pirates, they lived the longest and had the most battle experience. Coupled with Corey's talents in the rudder, Big Bertha could be ranked as one of the most powerful ships in the world. Captain, I can see some debris on the water. Shorty came running to Corey and said, "Lower the sails." Corey's order surprised Shorty and the crew. They were certain that Corey would order them to raise the sails to gain maximum speed. But on the contrary, she ordered them to lower the sails. Despite the shocking order, Shorty nodded as the crew pulled down the ropes, lowering the black sail with a crimson-red skull painted on the center. The ship gradually lost its speed, and since the wind was against them, they almost came to a halt. Meanwhile, the crew loaded the cannons and the mortar on the front of the deck. Once they could see the ghost ship, they would bombard it with all the firepower they had. As they slowly sailed toward the sea, where Corey noticed black smoke emanating, Big Bertha sailed toward the debris at a snail's pace. Suddenly, Corey felt a strong gust of wind blow past her. She quickly turned around to see the Dark Lord appear out of thin air with the Dark Queen. "My lord, my lady." Corey quickly bowed toward Michael and Gaia. "Captain is on board." Shorty roared as he ran toward Michael and Gaia. He smiled from ear to ear, looking at them. Michael acknowledged Shorty with a friendly nod. Corey was about to say something when Michael ascended into the air and landed on the crow's nest. "Let's see where you are," Michael muttered to himself as his pupils shrunk to the size of a tiny t. His perception swept across the sea. Michael closed his eyes for a moment, focusing on the environmental scanning. A few seconds later, Michael's eyes abruptly opened. He slowly turned around to see a ship far away on the horizon. The ship was too far for normal eyesight or even for the spyglass, but Michael could see the ship sailing with no crest or symbol on its sails. It was the same ship that sank Fairbank's ship. There was no doubt in Michael's mind. Michael's eyes completely turned pitch black, and then his pupils glowed like rubies for a moment. "Turn around the ship and sail to the southwest." Michael's voice echoed through the ship. Following Michael's order, Gaia ascended into the air and floated to Michael's side. "Did you find it?" asked Gaia, her eyes glimmering with intense murdering intent. Michael nodded. "We'll see how they hit and run this time," Michael snickered. "Just sail toward it as slow as you can. Let them come to us. I have a surprise for them." Gaia nodded as Michael leaped from the crow's nest into the water. Under the water, everything turned dark blue. Michael willed the APD to inject a pill into his bloodstream that would allow him to breathe underwater. He moved through the water like a shark until he reached the very bottom of Big Bertha. His eyes turned black, shooting dark beams at the hull. Countless bubbles appeared around the dark beams as the beams vaporized the water in an instant. Deep orange lines appeared in the black hull everywhere the dark beams touched. Michael cut a 3-meter-long and 2-meter-wide piece of hull and took out a tubular pipe from his space ring. The silver metal pipe perfectly fitted into the hole Michael had just carved out. After placing the pipe into the hole, Michael closed the hole once again with the wood and swam to the other side to repeat the same process. Michael spent the next 15 minutes moving along with the ship and fitting Big Bertha with the torpedo gun. Now that he had finished installing the guns, Big Bertha had 2 unique shots, the mortar and the torpedoes. Compared to the mortar, the torpedo had 5 times the range. Plus, when aiming at the target using the mortar, it created a red spotlight which was called the Red Death by the Ithilien people. Contrary to the mortar, the torpedo had no indicators visible to the enemies. Any ship that was unfortunate enough to meet the torpedo would get obliterated without even knowing what hit them. This made the torpedoes the perfect weapon to use against the ghost ships. Back on the upper deck, Shorty and some of the crew kept staring into the ocean, wondering how in the hell the Dark Lord was staying in the water for so long. Hey look! The pirate next to Shorty pointed at the horizon, where Shorty noticed a lone ship. Wait for the Dark Lord's orders, Corey shouted when she saw the crew agitating to man the cannons and bombard the ghost ship to pieces. Even Corey had a difficult time rotating the rudder instead of firing the mortar. However, the Dark Queen ordered them to stay calm and let the ghost ship attack them from a safe distance. If what Gaia learned about these ghost ships were true, they wouldn't dare to enter into close combat with Big Bertha. They knew about the Red Death. Therefore, they would try to hit and run while keeping themselves out of the mortar's range. As they were sailing toward the ghost ship, Michael shot out of the water and landed right beside Corey. Put these on. Michael handed over black goggles to Gaia and asked her to wear them. Okay, Gaia had no idea what it was, but she wore them as everything around her dimmed due to the black glass. Then Michael gave her a conical wooden piece with a button on top. Gaia grabbed the wood and placed her thumb on the button. Time for some payback. Michael cracked his neck, looking at the ghost ship in the distance. Chapter 856 Torpedo in Action. Gaia gawked around the calm sea with the goggles on her eyes. At first, everything darkened, but soon, a red appeared before her sight. What is this red dot? Gaia raised her hand, trying to touch the virtual dot. That's how you aim the torpedoes. They will hit wherever you put the red dot, and push the button. This button is just a temporary measure. I will build a trigger in the rudder later, said Michael. Of course, Michael himself could have worn the goggles and fired the torpedoes. The reason he chose not to was he had other plans. To be precise, a backup plan in case the ghost ship crew tried to kill themselves before they could apprehend them. As far as Michael was concerned, this facade had gone long enough. It was time he weeded out his enemies one by one. I have to adjust myself to this. Gaia stepped away from the rudder and joined Michael on the ship's front. Michael's long coat and hair fluttered in the wind as he stood there with his hands tufted into his pockets. Everyone on the ship had their gazes fixated on the ghost ship. Since the Dark Lord himself was with them, the crew's morale was sky high. Excitement coursed through their veins as they waited for the ghost ship to get closer. The closer they got to the ghost ship, the more excited everyone felt, especially Shorty, who couldn't wait to put the Olympus and the spell he had learned recently to use. The cannon crew was on the verge of lighting the fuse and bombarding the ghost ship. However, the ghost ship was still out of their range. Suddenly, they all heard a strange cry in the air. Michael recognized the sound. This was the same cry he heard when Fairbank and his ship were attacked. They have noticed us, said Michael. Don't attack them until I say so, Michael said before diving back into the sea. After Michael disappeared into the ocean, Gaia returned to Corey at the helm. To Gaia's surprise, the ghost ship halted sailing toward them just outside the mortar's firing range. It was like the ghost ship crew knew exactly how far the mortar could hit them. So they had done their homework. Gaia muttered under her breath. What are they doing? Kor asked as she saw the ghost ship slowly turning around. They want to stay outside the mortar's firing range, Gaia said. Should we catch up to them? Asked Corey, but Gaia shook her head. If we rush them, they might escape. I have a feeling their ship is faster than ours, Gaia said, walking to the rails. She leaned on the rails and watched the ghost ship without batting an eye. The red dot in her sight was right on the ship. If she wanted, she could fire the torpedoes. However, she had to wait for Michael's order. Meanwhile, inside the sea, Michael soared through the deep sea toward the ghost ship. He dived deeper into the ocean and used the lightning dash to increase his speed. In a few moments, he vaguely saw the ghost ship's dark shadow in the near distance. As he moved closer, he noticed strange ripples under the ghost ship. He closed his eyes and focused on the surroundings. A strange noise, a rhythmic pulse, reached his ears. The ghost ship was creating some kind of pulse around it. Because Michael was a resident of Earth, he was familiar with the sonar technology ships used to detect things underwater. To be honest, Michael was surprised and couldn't even believe the ship was using something similar to sonar. But the energy pulses he felt were definitely some kind of detection system. Everything made sense to Michael when he thought about it. If the ghost ship didn't have a way to detect hostiles under the water, one could swim underwater and catch them off guard, just like he was planning to do. There were some runes and arrays to achieve the same in cultivation continents. Considering the southern continent was inside the void line, runes and arrays wouldn't work here. Hence, someone had to build a new device to achieve the same effects. Michael was surprised that someone who wasn't him had actually managed to do so. System, scan the ship. Michael ordered the system. He needed to be sure. The system requires 10,000 badass points to scan the ship. Go for it, Michael confirmed. While the system's invisible rays were scanning the ship, Michael moved backward from the ghost ship. He didn't want the pulses to detect him. No matter what contraptions they used, today, he would start dismantling this unknown enemy. His enemies had mistaken his patience for a lack of action. The system can confirm the host's suspicion. The ghost ship has indeed a device that mimics sonar pulses to detect hostile activity underwater in a 10-meter radius. A powerful bolt of lightning to the hull could disrupt the device. As Michael was contemplating whether he should disrupt the device or not, he heard the cannons crackling inside the hull. The very next moment, the cannons exploded, sending a volley of flaming cannonballs toward Big Bertha. Michael was pushed back for a few meters by the shock wave that traveled around the ghost ship. Michael quickly turned on the thermal vision and turned in the direction of Big Bertha. Once again, the ghost ship surprised Michael with its cannon gun range. After he heard the explosion, Michael formed a bubble around his head and contacted Gaia through the earpiece. Are you hit? Michael asked Gaia. Michael heard Shorty and the crew shouting and cursing the ghost ship. It took Gaia a few seconds to respond to him. How in the fuck are they hitting us from this far? Where are you? I am losing my fucking patience here. Gaia roared in pure hatred toward the ghost ship. Her thumb was itching to press the button and fire the torpedoes. Fire the cannons and pretend you are putting up a fight. Let them think they have the upper hand, said Michael. No one in the ghost ship knew Michael was watching them from below. Having no idea, they kept bombarding Big Bertha. Michael didn't worry about his ship because it was built to withstand huge amounts of damage. It would take two man-o'-wars to attack Big Bertha from both sides at the same time to cripple her down. Surprisingly, the ghost ship's cannons had both range and power. On top of that, the reload time was way shorter than Michael had anticipated. After the third volley of cannon fire, Gaia contacted Michael. We are taking some damage, human. Anytime now, said Gaia. Michael noticed the ghost ship slowly sailing toward Big Bertha. Now that they had successfully damaged Big Bertha, the ghost ship crew had gotten more courageous. As Michael ordered, Big Bertha fired all her cannons, but none of the cannonballs could reach the ghost ship. For a few minutes, the roars of both ships echoed through the calm sea. As they continued the naval battle, the air reeked of gunpowder and burnt wood. From an outsider's perspective, Big Bertha was losing the battle because she caused no damage to the ghost ship while the latter bombarded Big Bertha with each round of fire. When the ghost ship fired the cannons for the fourth time, Michael clenched his fist as lightning bolts appeared and crackled around his wrists. He waited for the cannons to stop spitting out cannonballs. With lightning bolts crackling around his wrist, Michael followed behind the ghost ship. Gaia. Michael contacted Gaia. Do the honor, Michael snickered. Finally, Gaia was elated to hear Michael's order. On Big Bertha's upper deck, Gaia stood up from the cover and strolled toward the edge of the ship. Wooden splinters flew everywhere as the cannons on each side let out thick clouds of smoke after firing. Despite the chaos, Gaia stood firm and raised the button. Say hello to this bitch. Gaia pressed the button as the entire ship trembled for a moment. Except for Gaia, none of the crew were aware of the new weapon Michael installed in Big Bertha. She creased her sword-like brows as she saw no smoke or fire. In fact, nothing happened for a few minutes. My lady. Short crouched toward Gaia and pulled her sleeves. You should duck down. They are preparing to fire again, Shorty warned Gaia. Boom. Suddenly, they heard a clap of thunder rumbling in the distance. And boom, the ghost ship's left half exploded to bits and pieces. Michael's crew was completely stunned. If Gaia didn't know about the torpedoes, she would have thought the gunpowder barrels stored inside the ghost ship had caught fire somehow and exploded from within. The torpedo obliterated the ghost ship and turned its one half into charcoal wood. Hell yeah! Shorty bounced up and down in pure joy. But Gaia wasn't as happy as the crew. Instead, she focused on the calm sea around the burning ghost ship. Anytime now, she mumbled under her breath. As she expected, Michael shot out of the water like a whale on drugs and landed straight beside the ghost ship's captain. The crew atop the ghost ship was in chaos. They ran around like headless chickens in their weird gray robes. When Michael landed on their ship, they were completely caught off guard. The man in front of the rudder reached for his sword, only to get stabbed in the neck with an injection. His body froze as he fell down on the deck. Then Michael turned his focus to the rest. The moment Michael's gaze swept across the deck, an invisible force snuffed out the flames and darkened the ship. Everything turned dead silent for a few moments. The only sound they heard at that time was the lightning bolts crackling around Michael's wrist. The surviving crew immediately reached out for the dagger dangling on their waist. According to Corey, they used this dagger to cut their throats to avoid being captured. As the crew reached for the dagger, Michael simply raised his hand, sending a couple of wind blades toward them. The next moment, several heads flew in the air as blood sprayed out of headless bodies. From the beginning, Michael had no plans to take everyone hostage but one, the captain. As for the others, they could go to hell and wait for the others. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.